Chapter 97. This time, he didn't touch the corpse. He couldn't use Buddhist talismans, and he was worried that someone would see through him if he used them. Therefore, he didn't take them. Before the escaping cultivator could go around the side of the Jiakang temple, he felt waves of spiritual vigor behind him. He was sure that someone was fighting. Who could it be? His first thought was that someone was sniping at the terrifying monk. This thought was so strong that he wanted to turn around and take a look. No one was born a coward. There were always reasons. The cultivator thought that if he went back and told everyone what happened here today, others would ask him what he did. How should he answer? Running away was his first thought. After he ran out and the spiritual vigor behind him collided, the thought of looking back grew stronger. In the end, he stopped. Even if he went back to report, he had to have accurate information, right? It was a wonderful journey. He ran here in less than 100 breaths, but it took him a full hour to return. Then he saw a lying, headless corpse. Looking at the attire, he didn't see a monk's robe. He sighed. It was another resentful soul that died at the hands of a monk. Then he checked the corpse and found that it was all Buddhist items. Therefore, he began to pay attention to his surroundings and finally found the head. Only then did he understand that the arrogant and fierce monk had been beheaded. Who did it? This question wasn't difficult to answer. There was always a mysterious mastermind behind the attack on the Jiakang temple. It was none other than the six families. He knew who was most likely the mastermind. It was also a cultivator that he didn't want to face directly. Now, it seemed that his caution was too wise. To be able to kill the terrifying monk Qing Mu in such a short time, his strength was unfathomable. Should he pay a visit to express his gratitude? Or should he continue to pretend that he didn't know anything? This was a problem. Outside the Jiakang temple, there were thunderous cheers. The Jiakang temple's reputation was well-deserved. In front of tens of thousands of people, the temple promised to take out the sum of all the incense and oil money of the rich and powerful in Pu City this year and hand it all over to the government. A new couplet was painted on the newly erected archway outside the temple. The first line was, "To suffer losses is a blessing." The second line was, "To endure hardships is expensive." The horizontal line was, "Fortune is like the East Sea." He didn't know which mischievous person wrote this, but when he read it, Elder Goldenlight sighed. The Jiakang temple had been operating on the surface of Pu City for hundreds of years, which was why it had such a reputation today. But now, it had been completely destroyed. The commoners might not know about it, but the rich and powerful of Pu City were well aware of it. Just by looking at the gathering of Pu City's upper echelons, it was easy to tell. In the end, it was the rich who had to foot the bill. It seemed that the Jiakang temple was going to have a tough time. He wondered if Qing Mu was dead or alive. The difficulty of establishing a Buddhist temple in a world where Taoism flourished was indescribable to outsiders. The two matriarchs of Lu Province returned to Lu Province on the same day and did not stay at the Jiakang temple. They had already done what they needed to do and left the rest to the authorities. Most importantly, they also felt that there was an undercurrent after this ordinary spring spiritual assembly. Lu Yaoshi was very sensitive to this because of her husband's experiences when he was alive. The current Lu province was not suitable to participate in these whirlpools. The officials were not officials, the commoners were not commoners, and the merchants were not merchants. This was the case for a family that relied on others to survive. Lu Xiaoyi was called into the inner residence. The two matriarchs looked like they were interrogating him. They were both experienced and knowledgeable, so they knew that the difference was all because of Lu Xiaoyi's suggestion of using items as a substitute for money. Lu Xiaoyi laughed and was about to go forward to massage his mother's shoulders when Lu Yaoshi pushed him away. She did not say anything and just quietly waited for him to explain. Lu Xiaoyi had no choice but to sigh. Actually, I didn't expect things to develop to this stage and become so big. It's like this. After the two matriarchs heard this, Lu Yaoshi finally spoke. "Little E, are you saying that you only made a suggestion? The rest was actually handled by the few officials in the residence? Is it because the women in their mansions have also obtained similar evil items?" Lu Xiaoyi nodded. "No one could tolerate this. Even I can't, let alone the officials who are used to abusing others. Donating money is one thing, and being blackmailed is another. Anikai Huan pointed at him and chuckled. Little E, you were the first to discover that there was a problem with the prayer beads, but why did the other families immediately discover it? Don't tell me that it's because the other families also have a mysterious existence like Little E? Lu Xiaoyi smiled. He knew that this could not be hidden from the two shrewd matriarchs, but it did not matter. I gave them some pointers through a secret channel. Firstly, the Jiaqing Temple's actions can't be ignored. Secondly, the elders shouldn't be affected by it. But I didn't expect the officials to be so vicious. Lu Yaoshi nodded. They were all good believers in Buddhism. She was also very familiar with the other matriarchs. Of course, she could not watch them fall into the spiritual trap of the Jiaqing Temple. Believing in Buddhism was one thing, and throwing the future of their family into it was another. Little E, you don't want me and your Anikai to believe in Buddhism? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. I think that believing in Buddhism is to seek spiritual sustenance. If people can be good in this kind of sustenance and take helping others as their own pleasure, then it doesn't matter what they believe in. Whether it is Buddhism, Taoism, or other beliefs, they're just names on the surface. What you really believe in is nothing more than truth, kindness, and beauty, right? You can't deny their hundreds of years of efforts just because the Jiaqing Temple went too far this time. You can't overturn your understanding of the whole Buddhist doctrine just because of one or two people's evil deeds. How can there not be evil people who don't know how to behave? Similarly, you can't think that all monks are good just because the Buddhist doctrine is good. As long as you know what you really believe in, I don't care if you and Anikai continue to burn incense in the Jiaqing Temple. Lu Yaoshi's joy was beyond words. Little E has really grown up. How many times have I said this in the past year? Don't worry, your Anikai and I are not old fools. We know what's right. Little E, don't worry about our Buddhist hearts. It's not good to offend us, so you can solve it for us in private. Actually, if Little E had told us about this earlier, the punishment for this spring Dharma assembly might have been done even more perfectly and without leaving any traces behind. Lu Xiaoyi nodded in acknowledgement. Auntie Kai Huan also reminded him from the side. For things like this, I'm afraid that rushing to the front will lead to hatred. That's why we unanimously agreed to your couplet through other people's suggestions. But we won't put Lu Province at the front. Fortune as vast as the East Sea. Do you think we can't see through such obvious flirting? But we want to know, when Little E is in contact with the officials in Pooh City, will you leave behind any suspicions of using them? You have to know that the people in the government are all scheming people. If they remember what you did today, they might come back at some point in time. Lu Xiaoyi secretly sighed that the two old madams were indeed very knowledgeable about the dark side of the government. Mother, Auntie Kai, don't worry. I'm not in contact with the government. I'm dealing with other cultivators. In the world of cultivation, there were rules in the world of cultivation. I won't easily put myself in danger, because there's such a big Lu province that I can't carry. Chapter 98. Lu Xiaoyi returned to his study and closed his eyes to reflect on his gains and losses today. Well, the Jiaqing Temple had been eliminated and his goal had been achieved. This was the third person he had killed since he transmigrated. 3 lives in a year. The frequency was a bit high. It made him wonder what he had been doing in his previous life. Why was he so murderous? When something happened, the first thought that came to his mind was that the best enemy was a dead person. But this monk really deserved to die. First, he gave Buddha items to confuse his mother. Second, the Jiaqing Temple was fierce and ruthless. How could he feel at ease leaving such a person outside? His original intention of going to the Jiaqing Temple was to observe and not to kill anyone. If there was a group of people in the Jiaqing Temple, he was afraid that with his strength, he could only be a coward. But this possibility was not big. If the Jiaqing Temple was really a temple for cultivation, they would not have done such a despicable act of collecting money. If there was a rumor, a lot of rich people would cry and shout and send money to them, including Lu Xiaoyi. Fortunately, this time he succeeded, but he did lose some of his capital. The 7 spiritual fire talismans were the only talismans left by Liang Zerin, that he could use proficiently. This was the restriction of this world on the use of talismans. It was reasonable that you could never use a talisman that you did not know how to use. Otherwise, this world of cultivation would become a world of talismans. With such easy things, who would work hard on spells? The battle would become a battle of talismans, a battle of wealth and resources. The J-plate of the wind-rolling escape armor had been destroyed, but this thing could be made again. The last short-distance escape that was close to the level of foundation establishment was difficult for people in the chi-eating stage to react. The problem was that in this short escape, he lost control of himself. His speed was too fast, so he could not judge the opponent's position and wave his longsword at the right time. Whether he could kill the opponent or not depended on luck. What made him embarrassed was his ability to control objects. The penetrating power of the 9 flying daggers was too weak, and they couldn't cause any effective damage. If it wasn't for the spirit fire technique from before that had caused a large amount of grass to burn and form a thick smoke, it would have been very difficult to say whether he would have been able to succeed or not. He was afraid that he would have to run away as he had originally planned. He would not even dare to look back. He still had a final trump card, a porcelain bottle containing 50 red thread worms. However, the price of this method was too high, and he was a little reluctant to use it. After summing up the gains and losses, Lu Xiaoyi found that his means were still very limited. It would be better to fight as little as possible in the future. It was too dangerous. Luck could not always be with him, even if he had some talent in the field of killing. It was hard to understand why a person who fainted from blood had such a talent for killing. It was already late. It was not a good idea to go out of the city to cultivate today. His mood was also not right. After being nervous, he needed to relax. Lu Xiaoyi quietly climbed over the high wall. Then he would find Sister Li to ease his mood. He was not interested in green bean sprouts. It was better for her to have experience. She had the ability to endure, and he did not have to worry about being responsible for her future. Yep, let's do a night exploration with a masked man. Let's do a situation comedy. The mood needed to be designed as well. The Dharma assembly of the Jiakang Temple was still going on, but Lu Xiaoyi had completely put aside. The most exciting part of the Dharma assembly was the first day. Unfortunately, no one was lucky enough to witness it. He had completely returned to his usual routine. The risks he had experienced made him more concerned about the improvement of his cultivation. In view of his lack of means, he was prepared to focus on a few aspects in the following days. The fighting ability of holding a long sword. This was also the most important ability of a cultivator in the Chi-Eater stage. Under the premise that the foundation building was still far away, this ability could not be practiced as a joke. He needed to find a good teacher and practice diligently. It was not that he liked long swords, but with his current status, carrying a sword was the only choice. You can't carry a ghost head broadsword with your identity as a scholar, right? The space in Liang Quangren's 2 storage rings was limited. They could not fit 3-feet-long swords, so he could only carry them. There was no other choice but to carry a sword. He needed to practice the art of object control. It would be best if he could practice it while running at night. At that time, he could use the Jade Pure Emperor's Edict while running with the 9 flying daggers circling in front of him. It would be a beautiful scene. However, he could not do this at the moment because it was very difficult to retrieve objects. He could only do it slowly, and sometimes it would drop. It was very awkward. However, this was a direction. As long as he persevered, there would be a day when he would succeed. No matter what, this thing did not consume any resources and could be used endlessly. This was what he valued the most. He was also very curious. Why was it that as he practiced, he was getting further and further away from the Dharma cultivation? However, he was very clear that this was only a very special stage. Only by doing this could he ensure his fighting ability. When he reached the foundation building stage, he would be able to practice real spells. That would be the day he would be able to touch on his hobby, the art of object control for close combat. No matter what level of cultivation one reached, was it not indispensable? As for the other 2 spells, the Ice Finger Technique and the Iron Drum, he was also prepared to carefully study them. Not for anything else, but for Liang Quangren's talismans. If he did not learn these, he would not be able to throw away the talismans. At the end of the day, he did not have the resources to purchase talismans as he wished. However, this was not something that could be rushed. He could not go to Xianlai town now. He wondered what happened after Liang Quangren's murder. He needed to improve his cultivation and consolidate what he had learned. Before his cultivation reached the late stage of qi consuming, he did not want to go out and show off. Other than the red threadworm in the core of the Gobi Desert, he did not need to go anywhere else. After deciding on the direction of his cultivation, Ping and came in early morning 2 days later. Master, there's something strange. I don't know if it has anything to do with you, Lu Xiaoyi said encouragingly. Very good, Ping'an. You're very proactive now. This is very good. It's not a waste of my good treatment of you. Ping'an hesitated and said, on the second day of the spiritual assembly, a fortune teller came to the street opposite the mansion. On his divination banner, he wrote, Fate of the same city, for a meeting. The strange thing was, he only read the fortunes of people from Lu province. He ignored all the passers-by. I watched him for 3 days. I feel like he's hinting at something. Lu Xiaoyi found it strange. I go out every afternoon. Why haven't I seen him? Ping'an said, that person only reads the fortunes for half a day in the morning. He doesn't come in the afternoon. Moreover, Master, you're always coming and going. You don't necessarily go through the front door, do you? Lu Xiaoyi looked at him. Why do you think he's targeting Lu province? And not just a fortune teller who walks the streets? Ping'an stammered, don't take me for a fool. Ever since you asked me to investigate the monk's whereabouts, the spring spiritual assembly has caused quite a stir. Who in the city doesn't know about it? They all said that a few officials from Pu City had joined forces to suppress the Jiakang Temple. But from what I see, Master, you must have done a lot of things, right? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Even small people had their own little wisdom. With just a little thought, he could tell that Ping'an had done some shady business. I know, Ping'an, you're very responsible as the steward of the outer mansion. You must continue to work hard. Ping'an curled his lips. If you don't cause trouble, everyone will be more relaxed. Chapter 99. Lu Xiaoyi thought about it and decided to take a look. He didn't care about anything else, but he was worried about the safety of his mother and Auntie Kai in Lu province. He didn't want to burden them. A fortune teller sat on a folding stool on a street diagonally across from Lu province. He didn't say anything and didn't greet the passers-by. Lu Xiaoyi recognized him at first glance. He was the only Taoist cultivator who had survived the battle at the back of the Jiakang Temple. He was also the one who had run away quickly. He could also roughly guess the purpose of his visit. In fact, Lu Xiaoyi felt that it was impossible to completely hide his identity as a cultivator in a place like Pu City. Regardless of whether he was cultivating in the morning in Lu province or going to the Gobi Desert at night, he couldn't hide it from observant people. Unless he went deep into the Gobi Desert and stayed there for a long time, he would be worried about his family. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before he came into contact with a small cultivation circle in Pu City. He was mentally prepared for this. As a person living in the mortal world, he was far from being able to completely relax and integrate with nature. Therefore, he went straight to the point and walked in front of the fortune teller. The two of them looked into each other's eyes. May I trouble the great master to read my fortune? The fortune teller laughed. I'm just pretending to be mysterious. I don't dare call myself a great master, so I can't be considered a great master. Since you're here, why don't I treat you to a drink? Lu Xiaoyi gladly agreed. This man's words at the Jiakang Temple were insightful. He wasn't an ordinary person, so he could get to know him. As for his final escape, Lu Xiaoyi didn't think it was wrong. He didn't run away while his two companions were still fighting to the death. He only ran when his companions were dead. At most, he might have lost his courage, but it had nothing to do with his character. For rogue cultivators, this was their principle of survival. It couldn't be forced. It wasn't easy to be a hero. Drinking a cup was drinking tea, not wine. After the tea brewer left, the fortune tellers solemnly took out a few items, including 3 storage rings and other cultivation items, and placed them on the table. I'm Hu Yong. I'm a guest of the prefecture lord, and I live here. Besides my cultivation, I also do some work for the prefecture lord, but it's limited to cultivation. In the battle outside the Jiaqing temple, I was incompetent and lost a friend. Fortunately, young master helped me. Otherwise, once Qing Mu left the state, it would be extremely difficult to find him. Although it involves the battle between Buddhism and Taoism, the status of individual cultivators like us is actually low, and we are not included in the Taoist school. It is not possible for us to get the support of Taoism. Therefore, young master's help in spreading the name of Pu City's rogue cultivators is a great favor. You left in a hurry, so I sensed a disturbance in the spiritual vigor and went back to check. I overstepped my boundaries and took care of the corpse on your behalf. However, the remains of this evil monk should still belong to you. It's not my place to take over. After careful consideration, Hu Yong decided to meet with this expert from Lu province. It would be more beneficial to their future relationship if they were to break down the barrier between them. In the end, they could not continue to pretend that they did not know each other. It would be awkward for them, and they would have to rely on other means to contact each other. For example, sending messages to the prefecture lord. This was originally a matter of cultivation, so it was best to solve it within the scope of cultivation. It was not suitable to involve the government too much, especially with the death of Qing Mu from the Jiaqing temple. It was hard to say whether there would be any follow-up trouble. If someone really came to find them, who would deal with it? Hu Yong was definitely unwilling to face it alone. After all, he was not the one who killed the person, and he was not strong enough to deal with it. It was also not right to let the expert from Lu province deal with it. After all, he had helped them. Therefore, the best way was for both sides to communicate. At the very least, they could form a united force in Pu City. Then, everything would be fine. Taking out Qing Mu's belongings was just a test to show his sincerity. How could he not know that if the young master in front of him really wanted the monk's belongings, he would not be the one to pick up the corpse? Therefore, he would most likely not accept it. He could show his goodwill and not really lose anything. As a rogue cultivator, he took a lot of effort to weigh the pros and cons of this. He had long guessed that there were cultivators in Lu province, but he did not specifically identify them. He thought that it was most likely a legacy left behind by Major Lu or an expert sent by Madame Lu's family to protect her safety. He did not expect that the one who walked out was young Master Lu, who had a reputation for being a licentious person in Pu City. He was sure that young Master Lu was a cultivator, but he was not sure if there was really only one cultivator in Lu province. With young Master Lu's young age, how much progress could he have made in just 1 year when he was still trapped in the Earthcliff cave carving? Therefore, there should be someone else behind him. However, since only young Master Lu stood out today, it meant that the other person did not want to show up. Hu Yong could only pretend that he did not know. Fortunately, young Master Lu should be able to make the decision, so it did not matter. In the cultivation world, everyone had their own uniqueness, so it was not good to force things. As he expected, the young master from Lu province did not even look at the items on the table. He said calmly, "In the cultivation world, it belongs to whoever gets their hands on it. If you don't see it, you are giving it up." "Brother Hu, why are you being so polite? I wonder how Master Qin and the Jiaqing temple will react after this matter is over. I have always been lazy to meddle in other people's business. If I don't provoke someone, I don't want to get involved. Therefore, I'm a little vague about the aftermath." Hu Yong chuckled and took back a few storage rings without leaving a trace. This was within his expectations. "We have investigated the Jiaqing temple. We have also made contact with the temple's abbot Fangzhang. We can confirm that this matter was done by a foreign monk named Qing Mu, but it was not done by the Jiaqing temple as a whole. However, we do not know if there is anyone behind Qing Mu. Such a person is very abrupt. The higher-ups of the Jiaqing temple are all mortals, so they do not know his background. However, at least for a short time, there will not be any trouble." Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "I'm not worried about the Jiaqing temple. Instead, I am worried about brother whose noble master, Master Qin. You also know that this is not the first time Lu province and Master Qin have had a fortuitous encounter. Since brother who is a guest elder of the mansion lord, I wonder how far you can go for Master Qin? We are all making a living in Pooh City, so it is important for us to tolerate each other. You also know that cultivators solve problems in a more direct way. I hope that we will not reach that point. This was a blatant threat. Master Qin had already provoked Lu Province once and failed. If you want to do it again, then don't blame Lu Province for solving problems in a cultivator's way. There was another layer of meaning behind this. How would Hu Yong choose between them? Would he stand on the side of the cultivator or the employer? His words were very rude, but Hu Yong did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. This was how cultivators communicated. Lu Province was strong, so of course they had the right to threaten him. If they acted arrogantly, it was not impossible for them to directly attack Master Qin. This even included him, the so-called guest elder of Qin Manor. He had to be careful because in his position, he wanted to maintain a relationship with the cultivation circle and not with mortal officials. Master Qin had helped him, but he had already repaid him for more than 10 years. No kindness could last forever. Chapter 100. I won't help mortal officials do things that exceed the standards of cultivators. I've been insisting on this for more than 10 years. However, it's a fact that Lord Qin and I are old friends. I can guarantee that I will restrict Lord Qin's actions in Lu Province, regardless of whether he's willing or not. I hope that Lu Province won't pursue this matter any further. If I can't do it, I'll personally take care of this matter. Lu Xiaoyi was very satisfied. This was also an important reason why he came into contact with the cultivators in Pooh City. He wanted to let them know that Lu Province had strong cultivators watching over them. His principle in life was that it was better to show off one's strength than to keep a low profile. This could prevent accidental injuries and make people wary of him. After all, humans were a race that revered great power far more than anything else. They raised their cups and drank to show their respect. They had reached a consensus on this matter. It seemed a little ridiculous that two cultivators were so casual about the matters of a prefecture. In fact, it was in line with the nature of the cultivation world. This was something that mortal countries had always avoided. Unfortunately, their efforts could only maintain the appearance of not interfering with each other's business. They couldn't change the nature of their positions. Fellow Taoists, it's a pity. I was too far away at that time and couldn't react at all. Please forgive me for not standing up in time. After they finished talking, both sides had a foundation to continue. Cultivators couldn't do anything without cultivation. Hu Yong sighed and said, "This has nothing to do with you, young master. Even if I was close, I wouldn't have been able to react in time, let alone you. Rogue cultivators like us are always wandering between greed and cowardice. If we make the right choice, we'll make a small fortune. If we make the wrong choice, we'll lose our lives. I'm incompetent and avoided danger. I hope young master won't laugh at me." Lu Xiaoyi expressed his understanding. It's normal. Even if I were face to face with him, I would still choose to leave. Cultivators need to be aware of gains and losses, not hot-bloodedness. However, from the monk's methods, he doesn't seem like a pure rogue cultivator. His methods are strict, and he knows when to advance and retreat. In fact, his methods aren't at the level of an ordinary rogue cultivator. Could he be? Hu Yang's expression was grave. That's what I wanted to talk to young master about. Old Hu rummaged through his storage ring and found that most of the items inside were items from sections. Whether it was talismans or other items, they were not things that ordinary rogue cultivators could possess. Therefore, I believe that this monk was most likely a disciple of a sect with an inheritance. But why did he come to the Jiakhang temple alone? If there is a day when other sects come to take the lead, I hope that everyone can help each other and overcome the difficulties together. However, the possibility of this was not high. After all, the Chi Eater stage was the lowest level of cultivation. In the eyes of the true inheritors, it was simply not enough to enter the door of cultivation. Therefore, there won't be any revenge from a powerful sect. At most, it will be a few old friends. We can deal with them. The two of them got along quite well. Lu Xiaoyi was willing to associate with such an understanding person. They wouldn't become good friends, but if he knew his limits and knew when to advance and when to retreat, there was a possibility of cooperation. Most importantly, If he left Pooh City for a period of time one day, at least Lu Province would be safe. Hu Yang's role as a fortune teller had come to an end. He was very satisfied with this encounter. The people of Lu Province were not unreasonable. Lu Xiaoyi resumed his normal pace of cultivation and began to concentrate on breaking through to a higher level of cultivation. In the cultivation world, the weak had no right to speak. Even if he couldn't sense the foundation establishment stage for the rest of his life, he should still be a predator among the Qi Eater stage cultivators. He shouldn't be an ant who went to every market and acted like a thief. He also finally understood that in the mortal world, you could muddle along and pass your days in mediocrity, but you could also live out the rest of your life peacefully. In the cultivation circle, there was a force that constantly pushed you forward. Stopping meant that danger would come knocking on your door. There was no true leisure to speak of. He began to slowly increase the frequency and intensity of absorbing the red thread worm's spiritual power. Every night, after cultivating in the evening, a figure would run tirelessly through the Gobi Desert. Previously, he could only travel less than 100 miles, but now he could travel more than 100 miles. Lu Xiaoyi built all his cultivation techniques on the foundation of basic cultivation techniques and escape techniques. He had his own ideals. Magic cultivators were the most famous stationary turrets in the cultivation world. They didn't need to move much because they could control the changes in the surrounding environment. In this space, they were nature and the environment. If they moved too much, it would affect their ability to adapt to the environment they were familiar with. Lu Xiaoyi liked to run. He liked the feeling of running as fast as lightning. He felt that he could only unleash his strength to the fullest with this kind of speed. It was also pretty good to become a mobile turret. The Qi Eater stage was a stage for all cultivators to build their foundation. Even the sects didn't allow cultivators of this level to go out and wander as they pleased. This was because they had too few methods to deal with danger. If they were obsessed with these methods, it would delay their most fundamental cultivation. Therefore, the best way was to focus on quickly passing through this stage. If you didn't pass, there would be no value in continuing to nurture you. If you passed, a new world would open up for you. Then, it would be the time to determine your direction. Whether it was the direction of cultivation techniques, or the direction of spells, it would mean that you had truly become a cultivator and no longer a mortal. After Lu Xiaoyi's first busy year in the past, he finally returned to peace and quiet. He didn't need to take the imperial examinations, so he didn't have a group of book bags who groaned all day long. He didn't need to earn money to support his family, so he didn't have many business partners who were as hard-working as bees in the business world. He wasn't an official, so he didn't have any social interactions that he had to attend. Even interest circles like the Seven Heroes fell apart and went back to their own paths. There were still all kinds of small circles of young people in Pooh City, but they all unsurprisingly ignored a person like the young master of Lu Province, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The labels engraved on him included the fact that he was temperamental because of the brick, the fact that he often went to the Gobi Desert, and a very small number of people who were in the know told their disciples to keep a certain distance from him out of respect for cultivation. After coming to Pooh City for a year, he successfully made himself into a lonely soul drifting in the universe. Cultivation was destined to be a kind of loneliness. Lu Xiaoyi was very satisfied with his current state. He didn't think that he was lonely because he still had family. His only worry was how long he could maintain this beautiful state of mind. If he sensed that he was about to build his foundation, would all of this change? If his family left, he would become truly lonely. Would he lose his balance because of this? 3 years passed quietly just like that. He was still a young man with a sunny face. Because of his success in cultivation, not many traces of age could be seen on him. However, he was no longer 19 years old, but a young man of 22 years old. At this age, even if he was from a poor family, he would have already married and had children. Only his mother and Aunt Kai would occasionally look at him with complicated gazes that made him feel ashamed. This was the only place where he didn't follow his mother's instructions. Even second sister Li was married. Although she hinted countless times that he could still go and find her, Lu Xiaoyi knew that this story was coming to an end. Everyone had their own life, and this was especially true for women. He had no reason to ask Li Earnyang to accompany him in this ambiguous way forever. People would grow old. It was fine for men, but for women, it would be difficult for them to find a decent family even if they were from a wealthy family. Men's greatest hobby was to drag women down with them and persuade prostitutes to turn over a new leaf. He didn't want to be like them. Chapter 101. In the side courtyard of the Lu residence, this place had been changed into a small-scale martial arts practice field 3 years ago. The ones who were sweating here every day were no longer the few old soldiers. Their age did not allow them to engage in this kind of overly intense fighting. They were the healthy ones among the government soldiers who had experience in fighting. Under their recommendation, soldiers from other provinces and counties came to apply. They were not hired as guards of Lu province. In the Kingdom of Yi, this kind of behavior was not allowed as it was suspected of being a private gathering of armed forces. Those who were skilled in a particular field would be offered a 3-month teaching position in Lu province just to satisfy the young master of Lu province's interest in martial arts. This had become a joke among the upper class in Pu City. The young master of Lu province was a scholarly man. As long as he was willing to further his studies in the imperial examinations, he would have a bright future ahead of him. However, he chose to practice something that only the commoners of the lower class would be interested in. Moreover, he was not a famous martial artist in Jianghu. He was only found in the army. They did not understand Lu Xiaoyi, but only real cultivators could understand his intentions. However, cultivators looked down on mortal martial arts. It was too vulgar, too direct, and lacked beauty. However, Lu Xiaoyi knew that killing did not require beauty. He only needed to achieve his goal. Very few of these experienced soldiers would practice those complete sets of skills. Most of them only had a single unique skill for killing. Just this alone was worth 3 months of teaching and a rather generous amount of money. Others did not know, but these soldiers would not scoff at such an experience after leaving Lu province. In fact, every one of them had nothing to teach when they left. They were defeated by their disciples. Therefore, they knew that the young master of the Lu residence was not like the vast majority of nobles who treated learning as a hobby. He was serious about learning, fighting, and killing. The 3 months was actually out of consideration for their reputation. Most people who came here for a month would be at their wits' end. They would no longer have the status of an instructor, but had changed into a meat target. What surprised them the most was little Gongzi's abnormal physical fitness. Although he never used his body to bully mortals and mainly focused on learning skills, his abnormal reflexes were there for all to see. Many skills that were very powerful among mortals were ordinary in front of him. On this day, the martial arts practice field was empty. None of the instructors were left. They had been beaten black and blue by Lu Xiaoyi's martial arts technique, and it was becoming harder and harder to find new martial artists with true ability. This was a very natural thing. Lu Xiaoyi's abnormal body and spiritual power was at the level of a quasi-cultivator. This made the duel in the mortal world lack comparison. The last instructor walked over with a simple bag on his back. He was the only one who had stayed in Lu province for a full year. He was from Lu Xiaoyi's maternal uncle's family, an instructor of the imperial army who had been recommended by the general's residence in Yi City. He had stayed in Lu province for a full year and had come to bid farewell today. Lu Xiaoyi urged him to stay. "General, why are you doing this? Was it because Lu province did not treat them well? Your future in Yi City is bleak. You were ostracized and offended someone you shouldn't have. It's only been a year. I'm afraid some things can't be over, right? Why don't you stay in Lu province for a long time and bring your family here too? You can take care of each other." This instructor's surname was Guo, and he was a person with real ability. The position of an Imperial Army instructor was earned through real ability, not through flattery and connections. However, it was also because of this that he, who did not know how to socialize, ended up offending nobles and being ostracized from the Imperial Army. That was why he accepted Lu Xiaoyi's maternal uncle's request to settle down in Pu City. After spending a year together, Lu Xiaoyi admired this person's character and ability. He wanted to take him into the residence, but he could not bring himself to do so. This was because he was different from other people and had his own pride. Those who wanted to stay had to leave, but those who made a living wanted to stay. This was life. Things did not go according to one's wishes. Instructor Gui smiled. When the leaves fall, they return to their roots. Although my hometown is poor, it's the place where I was born and raised. I can't abandon it. Besides, there are people I care about there. Lu Xiaoyi did not try to persuade him. This kind of person could not be persuaded. It was just like how he would never forget his family in Pu City if he left his hometown. Even the Taoyuan Wonderland could not stop a wanderer from returning to his hometown. For the first time, a smile appeared on Instructor Gui's serious face. Actually, you've already learned my skills. There's nothing I can teach you, so there's no need to waste everyone's time here. I've already guessed what kind of person you are. There are many cultivators among the nobles in Zhaoya City, but you're the first one I've met who can learn martial arts from the mortal world with a steady heart like you. To be honest, it's not difficult for me to take down those so-called cultivators as long as I get close to them. However, you're different. Your talent is unparalleled. Once you enter the army, you'll be the enemy of 10,000 people. Unfortunately, with the path of cultivation, the martial arts of mortals are a joke. Instructor Gui sighed. Most of the martial arts of mortals are useless to you because your body is different. However, there's one basic principle that both mortals and cultivators must follow, which is strength and speed. In my opinion, at your level, there's no need to deliberately pursue those so-called skills. There's no need. Strength, invincible strength. This belongs to the category of cultivation. I can't give you any advice. Speed, this can be improved through a lot of repetitive training. If you swing your sword 10,000 times a day, 10 years later, the sword will be your hand. Instructor Gui finished his words and walked away, leaving Lu Xiaoyi behind with a bitter smile. He did not want to become a swordsman. Why would he practice sword swinging? However, on second thought, if he only considered the ability to fight in close combat, it didn't seem to be a big deal to practice it. It wouldn't affect his future learning. As the saying goes, a skill doesn't weigh down one's body. Anyway, he didn't have any better way to improve his fighting skills while he was still in the chi-eating stage. It didn't seem like a bad idea to become a swordsman in the mortal world. However, there was one point that he recognized. It was already completely unrealistic to want to learn anything extraordinary from these martial artists of the mortal world. The huge difference in strength, speed, and reaction caused everyone's understanding of consummate skills to be poles apart. The feints and tricks in the eyes of mortals were laughable in Lu Xiaoyi's eyes. He gradually began to understand the significance of speed in battle. After breakfast, he went to his mother's place to massage the two elders as usual. This was his daily homework. Because of his persistence, the two elders' bodies were much healthier than those of the same age. This was the most realistic meaning of his cultivation. However, today his mother had something to say to him. Recently, there's been an undercurrent in the upper echelons of Pu City. Have you noticed it, Xiaoyi? Lu Xiaoyi disagreed. I know. It's a change in the upper echelons, right? The officials are biting each other like dogs. It's nothing more than a bigger bone. This has nothing to do with our Lu province, right? Mother, what do you mean? Lu Yaoshi sighed. It has nothing to do with Lu province, but it has something to do with Zhaoya City's Yao Manor. Your second uncle and the others also want a bigger bone. Chapter 102. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. His second uncle was his late grandfather, the second son of General Yao, and his mother's brother. He was also the one who inherited the title of general. However, his title of general was hereditary and not real, so the value of his title was much lower. The Night Kingdom is about to change, and there are a few sons vying for the throne. Your second uncle is also eager to get share of the action. He sent a letter the other day asking me to contact a few of your father's favorite students to form a faction to support the third prince. I rejected him. Lu Xiaoyi did not understand. Mother, Lu Yaoshi sneered. Your father's students have high positions, but how could they betray their political beliefs just because of a letter? 20 years have passed. Even if your father were to come back, he would not be able to make them listen to his orders. Your second uncle has great ambition but little talent. His thinking is too simple. I am worried that his actions will bring disaster to the Yao family. Lu Xiaoyi's second uncle was the head of his mother's clan. His relationship with Lu province was not distant, but they were not close either. It was just a normal relationship. Sima Manor's glory was long gone, and they were separated by thousands of li. In the past 20 years, they had rarely met. It was normal for people to be cold. That military instructor Guo was able to come to Lu province, not because of his second uncle's recommendation, but because of his third uncle, who was not doing well. Only he could have connections with people from all walks of life. Mother, I think I've heard you say that second uncle's title is just an empty title. He doesn't have the power to lead troops. There are many people like him in Zhaoye. How can he play a role in a fight for the throne? You said that he would bring disaster to the Yao family. Isn't that a bit exaggerated? Lu Yaoshi sighed again. Xiao, you don't usually care about these things, so you don't know much about the court. The Night Kingdom ended with 2 generations of nobles. That is to say, after your second uncle passed the title of general, it will no longer continue. If the Yao family does not have any talents, then in a place like the Night Kingdom, it is inevitable that they will decline. Presumably, your second uncle is also worried about this. He wants to gain the support of the new monarch when he ascends the throne and continue the legacy of the Yao family. That is why he is licking the blood from the edge of the blade. It is truly a gamble with his back against the water. In fact, as long as one had a clear mind, they would not rashly join the fight for the throne. It would bring danger to themselves and their family. The matters of the royal family should be left to the royal family. How many good things would come out of an outsider getting involved? Even if they fail, they will at most fall out of favor, and they can still come back after a few decades. The worst are those clans who are too happy to rise and fall. Once they fail, the ones who will be killed as an example to others will definitely be them. Lu Xiaoyi was glad that he had such a reasonable mother. It was also possible that she had no choice but to learn these things from his father. His mother valued family very much. Even so, in these 3 years, she had not taken the initiative to ask him to marry and have children. This was her respect for him after learning about cultivation. Then, he should also respect his mother's feelings in other aspects. I received the letter 3 days ago. I have already written a reply. It is what I said to you just now, but I know that your second uncle will definitely not listen. He will even scold me for having a woman's view and not knowing how to protect the legacy of the Yao family. What I have been hesitating about is whether I should tell you or not. If Xiao was still the you from 4 years ago, I would definitely not tell you. But you are different now. You are a man and can handle the family's crisis on your own. Just like that time at the Jiakang Temple, you handled it very well. Not only did you dare to make a move, but more importantly, you knew how to keep a low profile and know when to stop. She pulled Lu Xiaoyi over and lovingly caressed his youthful face that seemed to have never changed. I was thinking that since Xiao Yi and I have already agreed that we will not hide anything from each other, I should tell you, no matter if it is a good thing or a bad thing. In this life, under my strong appearance, I am actually a soft-hearted person. Your Aunt Kai knows this best. So when I discipline you when you are young, she is the one who stands up for you most of the time. Although I haven't seen your second uncle for 20 years, this doesn't cut off the blood ties between us. I know that he might destroy the Yao family, and I, as an outsider, can't stop him. But that's a family. Not only is there your second uncle, there's also your second aunt, your cousins, and those nephews and nieces who haven't grown up yet. That is a big family. I have to do something. I can't just stand by and watch, can I? So I want Xiao Yi to send this letter to Zhaoye City. Only you can truly understand my thoughts. Only you have the ability to protect yourself in the complicated environment of Zhaoye City. Only you know what to do and what not to do. You are my flesh and blood. But now, I am sending you to the most dangerous city in the world at the most dangerous time. Xiao Yi, will you blame me? Lu Xiaoyi hugged his mother. Look at what you are saying. Isn't this the purpose of giving birth and raising a son? But before I go, I have a few questions that you need to answer. Lu Yaoshi looked at him with tears in her eyes and nodded. Why do you think second uncle will definitely fail? Maybe he will succeed if there is smoke coming out of his ancestral grave? Is it your own judgment or intuition? This was Lu Xiaoyi's first question. It was very important and would determine the direction he would go in. Lu Yaosher slapped him as punishment for saying something disrespectful like smoke coming out his ancestral grave. There are 4 princes in Jiaya country. The eldest prince passed away early. Now, the second, third, and fourth princes are competing for the throne. They are all middle-aged. When your father was still alive, he was listed as one of the prince's teachers. So, he had a lot of contact with them. At that time, the princes were already in their teens and 20s. Your father told me privately that the second prince is ruthless and patient. The third prince is famous for his virtue, and the fourth prince is quiet. They all have their strengths. But when it comes to who will succeed the throne, only the third prince is not possible. That is one of the reasons. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. What virtue? He only knew how to promote himself. In the fight for the throne, being too ostentatious was not a good thing. The so-called reputation was worthless in front of the army. Lu Yaosher continued. Among your father's favorite students, there are a few who are really nostalgic. Don't think that they don't come. Every year, they take care of me, their teacher's wife, in terms of finances and other aspects. We also exchange letters. Although they were talking about the trivial matters of life, they occasionally mentioned the important matters of the imperial court. Among them, they mentioned that your father's prediction might come true. They didn't say it out loud, but I understood what they meant. Don't be fooled by the fact that the third prince is jumping so high right now. It's just on the surface. When the dust settles, it'll be the result of confinement. However, I'm afraid that those who worship his stinky feet and burn incense under him will be the unlucky ones. Chapter 103. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. In a field he was not familiar with, he trusted the judgment of an experienced person. When it came to the throne, it involved too many things. He did not have a heart to judge who would take the throne in the end. He just trusted his parents. They were the most experienced and knowledgeable. Why does second uncle have to hug the third prince's thigh? Isn't it better to hug someone else? Or hugging one in each hand? With so many people huddled together, there is no merit to be gained. Lu Yaosher glared at him. Her son was so relaxed. Was it because he was confident? Or was the tiger cub fearless? If he wants to hug someone else's thigh, he needs to have the opportunity. Your second uncle is just a general with an empty title. He doesn't have any military power, and he doesn't have any appeal. Who cares about him? Only the third prince, who has a good relationship with many people, can accept him. I'm afraid he is not even a core member. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. With such an awkward position, what was she doing? Just wait for the new emperor to take the throne. Wasn't it good to go with the crowd? Treating the title of general as more important than the sky. If you don't have the ability, how can you stay? Mother, what is your goal? Do you want second uncle to be rich and powerful? Or do you just want to keep your life? This was Lu Xiaoyi's last question. Lu Yaosher spat. Rich and powerful? I don't have the heart to think about him. I just want to be a rich man. Don't lose your life and don't implicate the family. That is my only wish. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. That's good, that's good. If mother wants me to go and help second uncle build his career, I'm afraid I won't dare to go. So, I will leave immediately. It's better to save my uncle's family as soon as possible. Lu Yaosher pulled him back and scolded jokingly. Little E, you are so relaxed. I am relieved, but I have a few rules. You have to agree to them before you leave. Otherwise, you're not allowed to go. Lu Xiaoyi was helpless. Mother, you can't put a curse on me. Lu Yaosher looked at him. There are 3 things that you must agree to. First, your life is the most important. Not other people's lives, not your second uncle's life, but your life. Once there is danger, leave immediately. I know you have the ability to do so. If you can't do it, it's because you want to gamble. I won't let you gamble. You have to know that even if Zhao Yi and the Yao family were added together, they wouldn't be as important as you. This isn't just your life, it's also your Aunt Kai's and my life. Do you understand? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Mother, I promise you. Lu Yaosher grabbed him tightly. The reason why I want you to go is because I want to do something on the off chance that there is a chance. This is an assumption and not a necessity. You don't have a mission in the Yi Kingdom, and I don't have a specific request either. Because we all know how insignificant an individual is in the face of the entire national system. Even your cultivation circle is isolated from worldly power. How can a young man like you, who has only cultivated for a few years, challenge it? So, my second request is to watch from the sidelines. You can do something before it happens, but once it's done, don't try to change it. Don't use your personal strength to challenge an imperial power that has existed for thousands of years. Lu Xiaoyi allowed his mother to shake him and said softly, I understand. I'm just a little stronger than mortals. Lu Yaoshi was already regretting telling her son this, because she knew that her son always had his own ideas. He looked easygoing and quiet, but he was actually very daring. Third, don't try to get in touch with the people in the imperial court. They're all old foxes. They act one way in front of people and another way behind people. I won't even recommend your father's most trusted student to you, because I can't guarantee that when facing the rise and fall of the family, they will help you without hesitation and not think about their own family. If you're just poor, they won't hesitate to help you. But in the face of life and death, there is no righteousness. The only one you can trust is your third uncle, but he may not be in Zhaoyi now. So, I ask you to think of problems in the way you cultivators do. Simple and clear. If you can do it, do it. If you can't do it, leave. Can you? Lu Xiaoyi laughed. Mother, you really should cultivate. You were born with this temperament. Lu Yao sure scolded him, which was rare. I have a ghost temperament. I'm just a mother who doesn't want her child to be in danger. If I know other cultivators, you won't even have the chance to leave the house. You haven't promised me yet. Lu Xiaoyi took a deep breath and said solemnly, I promise you. That morning, Lu Xiaoyi left Lu province on 2 horses. He ran around the Gobi Desert every day, so he was always well prepared. All the cultivation items were stored in the storage ring. As for other things, as long as he had enough money, he could buy them. He had to hurry. No matter what he did, the sooner he arrived, the sooner he could deal with it. If his unlucky second uncle had already made a blood oath with someone, it would be too late for him to do anything. Leaving Pu City, entering Tsangman, passing through Liangping, there was the Great Night Avenue. This was one of the 3 major thoroughfares that the Kingdom of Yi spent a lot of money to build. It was divided into the east, west, and north, with the capital Yi City as the center. The only place that did not have a thoroughfare was the south. There were many rivers, lakes, and swamps that could not be built. Lu Xiaoyi was on the West Avenue. Once he was on the flat road, his speed suddenly increased. There were many towns on both sides of the road, and inns and horse stables. It was very convenient for him to rest, eat, and replenish his supplies. There was no need to think about where to rest when it was late. As long as his physical strength allowed, he could keep walking. After all, there would be a place to rest within a few miles. Lu Xiaoyi's daily journey was many times faster than the average person. For ordinary people, 200 miles a day was the limit. He could easily reach 500 or 600 miles. In fact, he could continue, but the 2 horses needed to rest, even if they were running empty. He had spiritual power that could be used at any time. The horses could only feel a limited amount of weight, so naturally, they could run faster and further. Pu City was more than 4,000 miles away from Night City. This was a straight-line distance. In fact, the Night Avenue was built between cities, so it was inevitable to take a long detour. The 4,000 miles would be at least 6,000 miles in the end. Even so, it was still much better than the road to Hemming Mountain. As long as he was on the Night Avenue, he did not have to wander around. He did not have to frequently ask for directions, nor did he have to look for bridges. It was very carefree. The further east they went, the clearer the weather became, unlike Pu City, which was close to the Gobi Desert. Sometimes, the sky would be foggy, the temperature would rise, and the accent would gradually change. Lu Xiaoyi was traveling as himself this time. Firstly, it was more convenient for him to have a scholarly reputation. Secondly, he could not hide this trip under the cover of night, so there was no need to sneak around. Chapter 104. On the evening of the 12th day, the towering walls of Nightshine City appeared in front of them. However, the city gate was closed. This was not a normal phenomenon. It must have something to do with the complicated struggle for the throne in Nightshine City. Outsiders who were not local were strictly interrogated. This was to prevent disloyal people from gathering in the city. Even ordinary people were treated like this, so it was impossible for an organized army to enter the city. Lu Xiaoyi did not waste any time. He found a large inn nearby, but all the rooms were full. He had no choice but to be a spendthrift and booked a side courtyard. Fortunately, the service here was good. Unlike the common inns, who did not even bother to give you water, bathing, changing clothes, and whatever you wanted to do, they would yell at you. The most convenient way to get in and out of Xiaoya City was for scholars like him. They did not have any martial skills, so they were not on guard. The others were like caravans with dozens of people. Only a few could get in, and the rest had to wait outside the city. The change of the imperial power was imminent, so they could not be too careful. When it was late, after dinner, the waiters were free. Lu Xiaoyi called a smart waiter and gave him a silver coin. The waiter immediately spilled everything he knew. There was nothing to hide, because what he knew was not a big secret. It was all information that the locals knew. However, it was important to Lu Xiaoyi, who was new to the city. The next morning, Lu Xiaoyi woke up early. He did not want to waste his precious time waiting in line. As soon as the sky turned bright, he started to move toward the gate. When he walked out, he realized that he was not the first to wake up. The big gate of Xiaoya City was packed with people. Lu Xiaoyi immediately realized his mistake. He should not have taken the west gate, but the side gate. Xiaoya City had 4 main gates: north, south, east, and west. There were also 9 side gates. The city was so big that 4 main gates were not enough. Among them, the north, west, and east gates were the most crowded because they were directly connected to the highway. The south gate and the 9 gates were much better, but since they were already here, they might as well give it a try. The main gate of the west side of the city was very wide. As usual, the main gate was closed. Only the royal family or the military used it. Commoners could only use the 6 side gates on both sides of the main gate. The crowd also lined up at these 6 side gates. The security was especially strict. Lu Xiaoyi estimated that there were hundreds of soldiers at the city gate alone, and this did not include the soldiers on the city walls that could not be seen. Their helmets were bright, and their halberds were shining, and their discipline was strict. They were worthy of being called the elite soldiers that guarded the capital. With a glance, he had a rough idea of how the 6 long lines were differentiated. 2 of them were local farmers carrying baskets from outside the city. They had entered the city early to make a living. These were also the 2 lines with the largest number of people. They were the passageway for the commoners to enter and exit. They were also the lines with the strictest inspection. Even the baskets had to be overturned to prevent people from secretly carrying weapons. The other line was a caravan of camel caravans and horses. There was an endless stream of them. They were the most strictly inspected, regardless of whether it was the people or the goods. The other 3 lines were more sparse. They were for officials, civil servants, the private carriages of various nobles to transport goods, scholars, and a series of people with status. Lu Xiaoyi chose the passageway that had scholars entering and exiting. He roughly estimated that this was the most suitable path for him to take based on his situation. However, the other scholars passed through very easily, but he was stopped here. An armored soldier who looked like a military officer walked over and took his kanga from the soldier. His basic situation was written on it, mainly about whether he had a criminal record, his occupation, his scholarly achievements, and other simple things. It was stamped by the Office of Transmission of Pu City's government office, so it was valid. The military officer did not see anything suspicious, but he saw that the scholar in front of him was different from other scholars. There was a certain high-spirited air in his elegance, and he was not a bookworm who only knew how to study. He had guarded the city gate for a long time, so he naturally had a pair of sharp eyes. He knew clearly who he should check and who he should not. "Young master, what are you doing in the city? It's a special period, so the inspection is a bit stricter." Please don't take offense, young master. The military officer was very polite. Although the Kangha did not indicate the scholar's family background, because Lu province was not an official now, just based on his impression, the military officer knew that such a person could not be imitated by ordinary poor scholars. That was a kind of noble air. Even when faced with dozens of fully armed soldiers, he did not show the slightest hint of panic or restraint. Usually, people like this were people who were usually arrogant and bossy. In their eyes, the soldiers were no different from their servants. To seek refuge with my relatives. Lu Xiaoyi's answer was very simple. Seeking refuge with your relatives at night, at this time, is not appropriate, is it? It was no secret that the emperor was critically ill at night. A rational person would not choose to come to the capital at this time, whether it was to do business or to seek an official position. If he was just a bookworm who did not know about the world, the military officer would not ask about this. However, since he had a background, how could he not know the severity of the situation? Since he still wanted to come, he must have a purpose. It is precisely because this is a special time that I received orders to come to Zhaoye. If it were any other time, I would be too lazy to come. Lu Xiaoyi knew very well what the military officer wanted to know. He had nothing to hide. It was a simple matter of family ties, so why should he make it so mysterious and arouse suspicion? Oh, the military officer was very surprised. Usually, people would subconsciously avoid this question, but this person did not hesitate. From this point of view, there was no problem with this person. However, the military officer's curiosity prompted him to continue asking. Young master, may I know which family you are seeking refuge with? And where are you from? Whose orders are you following? Lu Xiaoyi frowned, but still controlled his temper. This was official business. Who asked him to look so special? If he had known, he would have dressed more shabbily. Good Government Square in the south of the city, Fenway General's Mansion. That is my second uncle. I am following my mother's orders. She is the wife of the previous dynasty's Minister of War, Lu. However, I don't know if the Emperor still recognizes me. General, is there anything else you want to know? The military officer was in awe. The previous dynasty's Minister of War was a well-known figure in the Zhaoye kingdom. Even after so many years, his actions were still mixed with praise and blame. However, he had a reputation. With the Zhaoye kingdom's official system, he was a person who could control half of the court. Even now, the Minister of War had a say in who the Emperor belonged to. As for whether he would say it or not, it was another matter. Recognized. So it is young Master Lu. Of course, such a family member is worthy of visiting, too worthy of visiting. However, young master, the Zhaoye kingdom's law enforcement has been stricter recently. Perhaps it is different from the singing and dancing in the past. Many young masters from wealthy families have been obediently staying at home and not going anywhere. Young master, you. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. I know. I am here to persuade my second uncle to go to Pu City and get some fresh air. Is this a good place to stay? The military officer laughed and helped Lu Xiaoyi lead the horse. The two of them walked through the long corridor together and said softly, Young master, you are still the one who understands. You are indeed a true disciple of Lu province. Why should I, a small fry, get involved in this kind of thing? If I don't cause trouble, I won't be able to wash my hands of it. Lu Xiaoyi said half-jokingly, What is your name, General? If there is a chance, I will find you for a drink. This is my first time in the Zhaoye kingdom. I am not familiar with this place. If there is an accident, I will need someone I know to open the door for me and let me escape. The military officer laughed. He felt that this young master from Lu province had a good temper. He did not have the sour air of a scholar. My surname is Ling, and my courtesy name is Tianfeng. I am just a small military officer at the city gate. I dare not call myself a general. It is not a problem to find me for a drink. I live in the camp of the Lanxiang Square Garrison Army. However, I am afraid that I cannot open the door. This place is not up to me alone. Chapter 105. The two of them chatted all the way until they parted ways at the exit. Ling Tianfeng continued his duty, while Lu Xiaoyi went straight to the south of the city. It was all a joke, and no one would take it seriously. However, one had to admit that some things could be solved in a joke. He did not need anyone to open the city gates for him. He only needed to know the layout of the city guards. This was the last resort. He did not wish for this day to come. In Jiaya City, he was checked many times. Every time he passed by a square, there would be soldiers checking him. Because he did not have the road sign issued by the Jiaya City's yamen, they would check him every time he passed by. Even a good-tempered person like him was annoyed. When he arrived at the Jiaya Square, a place where high-ranking officials and nobles gathered, a few soldiers directly led the way. On one hand, they might want to curry favor with the Funwei General's mansion for a reward. On the other hand, they also wanted to see if he was a relative of the General's mansion. When he arrived at the General's mansion, there was another series of cumbersome procedures. If the gatekeeper could not make the decision, he would inform the housekeeper of the outer mansion. The housekeeper would report to the higher-ups. When the master was still not there, he would look for the mistress of the inner mansion. When Lu Xiaoyi could sit in the small living room and drink tea, it was already past lunchtime. From time to time, there were rustling sounds outside the window. It was a few naughty children peeping, but did not dare to come in. The small living room was a more private place. This was to some extent a recognition of Lu Xiaoyi's identity. However, no real master came out to welcome him. Even his cousins were probably busy and were not there like the general. However, he knew that if Major Lu was still alive, the welcome would start from the gate, or even the gate of Jiaya City. It was human nature. How many people in the world could treat everyone equally regardless of whether they were poor or poor? He could not do it himself. Why should he blame others? It was not until the end of the afternoon that a housekeeper came to apologize. He said that the First Lady of the inner mansion invited young Master Lu over for a chat. The First Lady was his second aunt. She had a third-rank title, which was far inferior to his mother. However, because of the presence of a man, his second aunt's third-rank title was much more valuable than his mother's first-rank title. After all, they were in Night Reflection City. The luxurious mansions here were unimaginable in a small place like Pooh City. There were countless doorways, winding corridors, and many twists and turns. Finally, they arrived at a place that looked like a small garden. He had heard from his mother that second aunt loved flowers. He did not feel any envy in his heart. On the contrary, he felt that it was not as natural and simple as his own Fu. After seeing the desolate changes of the Gobi Desert, which stretched as far as the eye could see, he had lost interest in all man-made sceneries. The only thing that interested him was, where did his father, Lu Sima, live when he was in the limelight? Who was living in that place now? There was an awning in the middle of the small garden. 7 or 8 women were either standing or sitting. 4 of them were dressed as masters, while the rest were servant girls and older female servants. There were all kinds of rare and exotic fruits on the table, in front of the table. However, he didn't know who the first madam was. She was the one that everyone was crowding around. Lu Xiaoyi walked forward unhurriedly and bowed deeply. Nephew Xiaoyi pays his respects to aunt. A junior should actually kneel in front of an elder, especially one who he had not seen for 20 years since he was born. However, he was now a scholar, so he could choose not to kneel. It all depended on whether he was here to ask for help or not. Lu Xiaoyi's knees were a little stiff. Other than his mother and Aunt Kai, he had never kneeled to anyone before. Therefore, he just made a perfunctory gesture. Based on his temperament in his previous life, it was impossible for him to kneel to this kind of indifferent relative. His stomach was still hungry. His likes and dislikes had always been straightforward. Second aunt was a noble lady who was used to big occasions. It was impossible to tell what she liked or disliked on the surface. After some introductions, he learned that the other 2 were his cousin-in-law, and the last one was a noble lady who came to the Yao Fu as a guest. After a series of conventional and courteous greetings, the cousin-in-law next to him began to beat around the bush to find out why he was here. This made Lu Xiaoyi immediately realize the family style of his second uncle. When it came to the women in the harem, the men's plans were flawless. "Aunt Xiong, you know that Xiaoyi is here to deliver a letter to my second uncle on behalf of my mother. In addition, You are also here to play at night for a while to broaden your horizons. When you go back, you will be able to talk about it." Aunt Xiong laughed. "That's right. Pooh City is a place with high mountains and far water. I don't know why Aunt chose to stay in such a place. Our relatives live far away and don't even have the chance to visit you. Xiaoi should have come long ago. After all, Yi City is not comparable to other places. In terms of prosperity, which city can compare to it? However, you came at a bad time." Second aunt, Yao Wangshi, coughed softly and stopped her daughter-in-law from speaking. It was inappropriate for a woman like her to speak about such important matters of the country. It was better for her to leave it for her husband to teach him a lesson when he returned. "Xiaoi, you're already a scholar. Did you come to the capital to further your studies? Your cousin Hao is in the Wunyang Pavilion. He can arrange for you to go there and listen to his lessons. They are all scholars who have been studying for decades and are well known in the Yi Kingdom. If you're taught by them, you will improve very quickly. For people like them, if there's nothing to talk about, they would just talk about the imperial examinations." However, for Lu Xiaoi, this was a sore spot. The Wunyang Pavilion was a place similar to the Imperial College in his previous life. His cousin, Yao Ziheo, was the most promising person in the next generation of the Yao family. He was in his 30s and was a scholar. Now, he was writing history in the Wunyang Pavilion and waiting for the opportunity to be an official. Lu Xiaoi was too lazy to listen to this, so he did not beat around the bush at all. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Annie. Little Lee has been tired of studying since he was young, and he doesn't like the intrigue in the bureaucracy. Therefore, this literary examination was forced by my mother. For this, she even spent money and asked someone else. If the literary examination is like this, then there's no need to mention the literary profundity, the literary canon, and the literary champion. Therefore, I came to Yi Kingdom this time to have fun. I have no other intentions." Lu Xiaoi's answer successfully reduced Yao Wangshi, who originally did not want to spend too much time on him, to less than a quarter of an hour. After he was brought to his residence by the servants, the female masters in the little garden could not help but sigh. They all knew the past of the Lu Manor, especially Yao Wangshi, who had personally experienced the glory of the Sima Manor at that time. It was truly a place where there were scholars to chat and laugh with, and no one was an amateur. Unfortunately, this child, he looks like a talented person, but I did not expect him to be so unambitious. When Sima Lu first entered Zhaoye, he was a talented person. I don't know how many ladies were attracted to him, but in the end, it was your sister-in-law who took advantage of him. Life is unpredictable, but his only son. Yao Wangshi pursed her lips. My sister-in-law is the one who is bad. Without her connivance, without her reclusion, this child would not have become like this. In life, if one does not advance, one will fall behind. Because of one failure, one will see through the world and live in seclusion. If all of them are like this, how many people will be left in the Yi Kingdom? If one fails, one can just climb back up. If the father is gone, the son will take over. Only this way can one maintain the prosperity of the family. Yet, he want to learn from those who failed. Chapter 106. There were countless attitudes in life. Who could say for sure which was better? Lu Xiaoi's residence was in a separate courtyard next to the inner residence of Yao Mansion. It was very close to his second uncle's study. Although his relationship with his second uncle's family was not very close, the general's mansion treated him well. They treated him like a relative, not a beggar. The furnishings in the courtyard were all better than those in Lu province. There were even maids to serve him, and dinner was served early. Lu Xiaoi just remembered that the rules of the big families were that they would not serve food before meeting the master. It was impolite. Originally, he should have waited for his second uncle to come back to welcome him. But now, it seemed that General Finwei was out socializing tonight and would not be back for a while. To be so brazenly communicating with each other before the fight for the throne, that was collusion, that was collusion, that was collusion. What was second uncle thinking? Even if he had inherited the title of nobility because of his father, he should not have been so insensible about politics after spending so many years in Zhaoye City. As for how to help second uncle, He was actually at a loss. He just did not want to show it in front of his mother. In the beginning, his mother was reluctant to let him cultivate. Now, she thought too highly of him. The scene in the Jokhang temple made his mother think that he had some kind of magical ability. Only he knew that this ability did not exist. He was not a real cultivator now. He was just a strong, ordinary person. In this strange, big city, the capital of Zhaoye City, he was also very confused. He did not know where to start. There was no one who could help him, and he did not have enough comprehensive and accurate information. If the emperor died tomorrow, he really did not know what to do. Run out of the city with his second uncle's family? That was impossible. There was no way, and with such a big family, would they give up the glory and wealth? If they really ran to a remote place, it would be better for them to die in Zhaoye City. Besides, where could they run to? Lu Xiaoyi had a headache. He couldn't openly cultivate in this place because the capital of the Night Illumination Kingdom was the place with the highest concentration of cultivators. As long as he cultivated here, the spirit aura above the Yao Mansion would show that there was a cultivator here. Deep in thought in the dark, he could hear the door of the general's mansion open. Second uncle had come back. He didn't go to the inner courtyard, but went straight to the study. There was only a row of rooms and a parapet wall between him and Lu Xiaoyi's courtyard, so he could hear everything clearly. It wasn't until second uncle fell asleep on the soft couch behind the study that he could clearly hear a servant reporting his nephew's arrival to him. However, it only elicited a light from second uncle. He realized that there might be a problem with his mother's judgment. If his second uncle was really looking forward to his mother's help, he would have summoned her immediately for such a big matter instead of just sleeping. Or was the help from father's students just a part of second uncle's plan? Did he have something more powerful to rely on? None of them were easy to deal with. His mother was right. The only thing he could rely on in this place was his identity as a cultivator. It had been 4 years since he entered the Tao. In the past 3 years, he had been able to maintain a rapid cultivation speed. This was because the precious red thread worm could provide him with a huge amount of spiritual opportunity, and because he had a unique running cultivation method. Just before the end of the year, he had successfully entered the late stage of qi eating. However, his cultivation speed had suddenly slowed down. He didn't understand why. There was no problem with the spirit aura, but his cultivation speed was as slow as a tortoise's crawl. He had realized that he had reached a bottleneck, but he had no idea how to break through it. He didn't even know what other cultivators did at this stage. The only cultivator he knew was Hu Yong, who was only a mid-stage cultivator. There was no need for him to communicate with him. Lu Xiaoyi felt that with his current ability, he might be able to jump around in Pu City, but in Night Illumination City, it was better to tuck his tail between his legs. The next morning, Lu Xiaoyi could only swing his sword in his room. According to the instructor, he had to do it 10,000 times a day. That was the only thing he could do at the moment. Swinging the sword was not just a simple muscle movement. It required him to infuse his spirit aura into it. It sounded simple, but it was actually difficult to do. The amount of spirit aura that could be infused into the sword would determine the power of the sword. To put it simply, by constantly circulating the spirit aura in one's body, the spirit aura that was infused into the sword would become stronger and more refined. At least, he felt that after nearly a year of swinging the sword, he could easily cut open Monk Ching Mu's Vajra shell, even without using the 4th gear of the Tornado escape armor. That was progress. After breakfast, a servant came to invite him to the study. It was his second uncle who wanted to see him. He also wanted to take this opportunity to find out the real situation of his second uncle. He didn't have much hope for this, because everyone's focus was different. He wanted to strengthen himself and prolong his life. However, for an old bureaucrat like his second uncle, playing mind games was his specialty. This was the first time Lu Xiaoyi had seen his second uncle. He had a square face and a dignified aura. It had to be said that, at least in terms of appearance, he was very suitable for the identity of a general, especially after he wore the armor that covered his slightly bulging belly. Xiaoyi greets second uncle. This time, Lu Xiaoyi's greeting was even simpler. He only bowed slightly. Sit. General Fenwei pointed to a chair. Originally, Lu Xiaoyi did not have the qualifications to sit in front of the elders, especially a high-ranking family head like himself. However, since Lu Xiaoyi was sending the letter on behalf of his mother, he represented another power. This was something that needed to be respected. Lu Xiaoyi respectfully placed the letter on the desk before sitting down calmly. Although he did not look directly at the general, his perception covered him. Even if his heart beat one more time, he could still feel it. However, he was disappointed. From the beginning to the end, General Fenway did not show any abnormalities after reading the letter. It was as if this was an ordinary letter that had nothing to do with the situation in the imperial court. General Fenway sneered as if everything was under his control. Your mother rejected my request. This is not strange. Ever since I was young, she has never gone according to my wishes. Even when she disregarded my objections, she married your father, who was still a small official in the Ministry of Personnel. If she was not a girl, I would not be able to be the family head. The most regrettable thing in my life is that my daughter is the most outstanding, while my two sons are useless. This second uncle of his behaved very much like a general when he admitted the grievances between the older generation in front of the younger generation. However, he did not know if he really thought so or if he was just pretending. He could not answer. Only silence was golden. Chapter 107. Your mother has a good eye for things. She rarely makes mistakes and has followed your father for so many years. If she has a different view on this fight for the throne, then it is inevitable. I also know that she has a better eye for things. General Fenway seemed to be talking about something that had nothing to do with him. But I have no choice, even if I know that the chances are slim. The second prince and the fourth prince both have the intention of losing their titles. Not only are the military titles no longer hereditary, but even the title of prince is no longer hereditary. So, for someone like me, I have no choice. Even if I know that the chances are slim, I can only struggle and fight for that slim chance of survival. This is the difference between your mother and I. She chooses to go with the flow, while I choose to resist. Do you have anything else to say? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head gloomily. He had a lot of words to persuade him, but after his second uncle pointed it out, he found himself speechless. The words he had prepared were all nonsense in the face of the cruel reality. After living for a few more decades, there was nothing that he could not see clearly. There was no right or wrong. It was just a difference in position. What will the outcome be? I know very well. That includes those hereditary descendants like me, and even the prince. Pointing at the backyard, General Fenway said sternly, "You've met your aunts. Do you think noble ladies like them can tolerate living in an ordinary courtyard and working hard every day for daily necessities? They even have to wash and mend their own clothes. Can they? This is a situation where they are bound together for good or ill. They're already used to living a luxurious life. In order to continue living like this in the future, they must have the self-awareness to take risks. There is nothing that can be obtained without sowing. Even if they fail this time, their lives will be worth it. So, don't judge us with your mother's ideals. They are not pitiful. On the contrary, they think that the one who is pitiful is your mother." Lu Xiaoyi was completely speechless. He even suspected that this old man had been brainwashed by something strange. You can wait for the outcome of this matter at night, but I can't guarantee that you won't get into trouble by doing so. You can also leave. Leave now. Your mother must have told you that if things don't go well, don't worry about that idiot's second uncle. Just ensure your own safety. Am I right? Lu Xiaoyi had never felt so awkward before, but he couldn't refute a single word. But in his heart, he secretly complained to his mother. "My dear mother, you look down on your own brother. When you go back, tell your mother that she doesn't have to worry about the Yao family's inheritance. My second branch won't be able to escape. Every single one of them is on the official registry, but your third uncle's branch can be preserved." He wasn't married, but that didn't mean he wouldn't fool around outside. His vile spawns are in the north and south. There were also women who went to brothels to give birth to his children. Even I don't know how many love affairs he has outside. So it's very safe. After General Fenway finished speaking, he ignored his nephew and picked up a scroll from the desk to read. This was to send off the guest, which was similar to serving tea. Lu Xiaoyi was embarrassed from the moment he came in, and the awkwardness lasted until the end. He realized that he was still too inexperienced. Under the verbal bombardment of these old bureaucrats, he couldn't even find a reason to persuade them. The old man had already considered all aspects, including the Yao family's bloodline inheritance. He could only awkwardly clasp his hands and walk out. At least, he was sure that his second uncle was worth his help. What he hated the most were those who didn't care about the life and death of the rest of the family and dragged everyone to destruction in order to climb up the social ladder. He knew to let his third uncle stay away from the inheritance, and he knew to let Lu Xiaoyi leave. There was still hope, but from his attitude toward his family, he could see that his second uncle was unusually crazy. This world should not belong to a Confucian world dominated by scholars. It was too deviant. His first instinct was that. The current second uncle was not the same second uncle as before. He had never had any contact with his second uncle, so he had no impression of his past. If it was as he said, that his mother's foresight had always been good, how could his mother have misjudged him as a brother who had lived together for more than 10 years? He chose to believe in his mother. General Fenway did not need to attend court every day. Even if the emperor did not fall ill, a hereditary military position like his could basically be used to work from home. Unlike his father's position as the left general, he was truly in a high position and had a lot of say in the military. This was especially so during this sensitive period. Other than occasionally going out at night to meet with others, he spent most of his time in his study, reading and writing. He did not gather with friends, nor was he good at summoning singers or concubines. He did not even go to the inner residence. Regardless of whether it was Madame Wang or his concubines, his self-discipline was frightening. However, the servants of the Yao family were used to their master's behavior. Everything was normal. What they were curious about was how the young master, who came to Jiaya City for the first time, was able to stay in the mansion. He did not even step out of the mansion. Although Jiaya City's current situation was not suitable for a drunken life, it was not a problem to go out during the day and enjoy the various delicacies in the capital, the colorful shopping mall, and other places that could be open normally. Compared to a small place like Poo City, it was like heaven and earth. Was it necessary to be so honest? It was not like he was immersed in reading. Lu Xiaoyi was indeed reading, but he was not reading any serious books. He was too lazy to read about the imperial examinations. He was only interested in the things about cultivation. In Jiaya City, there were more such things than in Poo City. Not only were there more, but they were also more in-depth. As a general's residence, books were the first choice for decoration, regardless of whether it was real or not. If one did not have a few books on the wall in the study room, it would be embarrassing to see guests. For example, the study rooms of second uncle and several cousins would naturally be filled with the most serious books. But for relatives like Lu Xiaoyi, there was no need to hide the kind of books, so the study rooms were naturally filled with leisure books. That was exactly what Lu Xiaoyi wanted. At least, he would not be doing nothing in Jiaya City. He could at least gain something. Chapter 108. On the third day of Lu Xiaoyi's stay in Yao Mansion, his judgment was confirmed. In the middle of the night, a figure flitted across Lu Xiaoyi's room. It was light and silent, leaving no traces behind. Even the experts of the mortal world couldn't do it, but this person stepped on it as if it was flat ground. This was the reason why he insisted on not cultivating in Yao Mansion. If there was a fluctuation of spiritual opportunity, he would not be able to wait for this person. Only cultivators could invade to such a degree. For this reason, he maintained the deepest level of quietness, but he put the true essence of his heavy ears to the maximum. This distance was still considered suitable, and he could ensure that he could hear to the greatest extent. He was not worried that this person would harm his uncle. The night city was not suitable for assassination. Everything was not clear yet. 2 hours later, the shadow went back the same way he came. The guards in the mansion did not notice him. Lu Xiaoyi hesitated for a moment and then gave up the idea of following him. His responsibility was to pull his uncle out of the mud pit, not to keep the Knight dynasty alive and eliminate traitors. Besides, he did not have the ability to do so. In the middle of the night, second uncle was resting in the study, as usual. The quality of his sleep was good, and he fell into a deep sleep after a while. It was not easy for a person at his age who had great things on his mind. Lu Xiaoyi could easily judge this from his breathing. There was no special defense in his room. He was a general who did not have military power, so he did not need it. Besides, it was not good for people with bad intentions to go in and out. The cultivator could take advantage of this, and so could Lu Xiaoyi. The door was locked, but the windows were unlocked. In a city that had been peaceful for hundreds of years, no one could be vigilant all the time. Lu Xiaoyi quietly sneaked into the room. The body movement of 10 feet was not suitable for escaping in such a narrow space, but a cultivator's deeply transformed body could still make him as light as a feather. She moved to second uncle's bedside and brushed the Shunmin, Bai Wei, and Yongquan acupoints as fast as lightning. This was to ensure that second uncle would not suddenly wake up. Some people had special abilities and would be extremely alert even in their sleep. He slowly spread out his spiritual energy force field and tried his best to keep it within the scope of the study. After scanning it indiscriminately, he finally found an object that reacted with spiritual vigor. It was a golden tiger seal on the belt of the official's robe. This thing was the seal of authority of a general like second uncle. Usually, he would keep it close to his body and never leave it. If the emperor allowed him to take charge of the army one day, he would give him the cloud pattern seal, which would combine with the tiger seal's seal. Then, he would have the right to lead an army. It could be said that this was the lifeblood of a general. However, there was a faint fluctuation of spiritual vigor emanating from it. If Lu Xiaoyi hadn't deliberately searched for it at close range, he wouldn't have been able to discover its secrets. Holding the tiger talisman golden seal in his hand, Lu Xiaoyi immediately understood the use of this item. It was the same as the Buddhist item made by monk Qing Mu in the Jiakang Temple. This item could affect a person's mind and will. However, the Buddhist item magnified the worship of the pilgrims to Buddha, while this golden seal magnified and bewitched the desires in the hearts of mortals. It could make people take actions that they wanted to do but didn't dare to do. The control of the mind was not within the scope of a Qi Eater cultivator's ability. Even a foundation establishment cultivator could only dabble in it. Therefore, the origin of this item was very suspicious. Basically, it couldn't have been made by a Qi Eater loose cultivator. There were two origins. One was a foundation establishment cultivator, and the other was a disciple of a sect. If a foundation establishment cultivator wanted to participate in the fight for the throne, there was no need for him to take the low-level route. Wasting his energy on a general like second uncle who didn't hold any real power was just pure nonsense. Therefore, it could only be a disciple of a sect who was playing tricks. Or it could be a collusion between a loose cultivator and a disciple of a sect. Lu Xiaoyi could make these judgments, but he couldn't make tit for tat or aim at the target. This was because he was a layman when it came to controlling the mind. Not only this tiger talisman golden seal, but also monk Qing Mu's Buddhist item. It was because he couldn't do anything about it that he was so angry at that time. In his skill library, there were very few spells, not to mention the mind control that required the divine sense as the foundation. He was completely powerless. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head and was about to leave to think of another way. However, he suddenly stopped. He came to second uncle's bed again. This time, he focused his attention on the floating cloud in his sea of consciousness that he had never been able to control. He could feel the restlessness of the floating cloud. It was a feeling of wanting to devour. When he used the floating cloud to deal with normal people, he had never noticed this restlessness. If that's the case, does it mean that my floating clouds have the ability to devour abnormal mental powers? Floating luck belonged to the lowest level of the entire fate system. It was also the only so-called cheat that he could feel after he transmigrated. Second uncle's behavior had deviated from his normal way of thinking. In other words, his fate would change because of this. Maybe he would succeed in becoming a dragon, or maybe he would die and his family would be wiped out. However, none of these were the results that he was supposed to have. His fate might be ordinary. No matter who became the emperor, he would be as ordinary as always, just waiting to die. What his floating clouds wanted to devour was this kind of abnormal change of fate that was not of his own will. That must be it. Lu Xiaoyi was very happy. He didn't expect Zhao Ye and his team to have such an unexpected gain in the cheat. He didn't choose to devour the floating cloud immediately. He needed to see more clearly. To be honest, he was an insignificant person in this fight for the throne. He didn't even have any value. The only person he could influence now was his second uncle. So, of course, he had to choose the best starting point. He came once and ended it. Who would want to endlessly waste time with these people who were fighting for power? The days were dull and boring, but fortunately, there were still books to read. The mysterious cultivator came twice, the same person, mainly to arrange the details of the fight with second uncle. Lu Xiaoyi, with a pair of well-trained ears, roughly learned the truth of the plan from it. This was not a fair fight. The third prince's family knew this very well. If he relied on the old emperor to appoint the throne, he would have no chance at all. Therefore, he colluded with the cultivator. It was impossible to complete a palace coup with just a small number of cultivators. It required the support of the palace's internal guards, the guards outside the palace, and even the mysterious yamen that the kingdom used to deal with cultivators. These things were complicated. When it came to second uncle, he only knew how to control the guards outside the palace. He was just a screw in a machine, the kind that was dispensable. It could be seen from the fact that the cultivator who contacted him was only at the middle stage of qi eating. Naturally, it was impossible for him to reveal more details. Fortunately, Lu Xiaoyi didn't care. He didn't want to fully understand the truth. It was too far away from him, and it would only cause trouble. The only thing he did was to make some small changes to the golden tiger seal. He didn't change it, but made it so that second uncle would feel a tingling sensation after wearing it for a long time. This change would disappear after the tingling sensation, making it impossible to trace the source of the tingling sensation. The purpose was to make second uncle complain to the cultivator about the discomfort of the golden seal. Of course, the cultivator didn't find anything after checking it. Therefore, he dragged it on and waited to see if there were any other changes. Of course, the tingling sensation wouldn't be harmful. It was just like being pricked by a needle. The purpose of doing all this was to find an excuse. When the coup was finally launched, second uncle would have an excuse to not participate. Chapter 109. The excuse was for the third prince to see. The will of heaven was unpredictable. What if such a bold coup succeeded? If Lu Xiaoyi stopped his second uncle, wouldn't he be ruining his future? He was hated by the emperor and dropped the ball at the critical moment. Was there any other reason? Now, he could push the blame to the cultivator's golden seal and find a random reason to fool them. If he was lucky, his career would be prosperous. If he was unlucky, he wouldn't be beheaded. Look, I had a reaction when I wore this thing. I told you, but you didn't take it seriously. Then I fainted at the last moment. For an old bureaucrat, shirking responsibility was a compulsory course. It didn't need to be taught. It was that simple. Lu Xiaoyi's advantage was that he didn't need to consider who would take the throne. He just needed to let the family survive. In this way, the difficulty was much lower. Such days dragged on for a few more days. It had been half a month since Lu Xiaoyi entered the city, which made him complain that the old emperor was really worrisome. Either you ascend the throne in advance and settle the court so that everyone would not have to worry about you, so that everyone could find their own mothers and hug their own legs, or you die quickly so that everyone could see the results and be done with it. Dragging on and exhausting everyone's patience like this, how could they live on? Fortunately, half a month later, the confirmed news finally came. The cultivator entered the mansion at 1 o'clock in the morning and talked with his uncle in detail. Lu Xiaoyi heard it clearly across the yard. The old emperor had passed away and passed the throne to the fourth prince. There was no time to lose. They had already stolen the cloud pattern talisman before dawn. Together with second uncle's ferocious General Tiger talisman, they controlled the garrison troops stationed in the city. They were responsible for defending the imperial city and resisting the followers of the other princes. This was not a very crucial or core task. Perhaps they also considered his uncle's ability and influence. At most, this was the best they could do. After discussing many details, the cultivators went through the back, leaving the second uncle pacing back and forth. His usual good and punctual sleep had lost its effect now. It was also difficult for him. How could he continue to sleep so carelessly when it was such a big event? Lu Xiaoyi had originally wanted to wait for him to fall asleep before helping him get rid of the mental influence. But now it seemed that it was impossible not to do it in front of him. Seeing that his second uncle had taken out wine, was he trying to use wine to make him more courageous? Left with no other choice, he carried the go pouch and walked out of the room, heading straight for his second uncle's study. Along the way, he encountered many loyal guards, but they didn't dare to do anything to the master's nephew. They just followed him all the way to the study. Outside the study, an attendant went in to report. After a long time, the tired voice of General Fenway was heard. "Little E, come in." Only then did everyone return to their duties. Lu Xiaoyi walked into the study, which was brightly lit. He gently closed the door and did not even salute. He sat down next to the 8 Immortals table and tossed his chest bag onto the table. "Second uncle, the night is long and it's hard to forget. Shall I play a game with second uncle?" The old general stared at him. Under his gaze, which had been in power for a long time, ordinary people would not be able to bear it, especially young people. But under his sharp gaze, his nephew's clear gaze was as vast as the ocean, making it impossible for him to display his sharpness. He sat down, still staring at him. This nephew of his had not left, nor did he go out for a stroll. At such a critical moment, he came to find him to play Go. There must be a reason. Something was strange. Could it be that the Liu family had already sided with the second prince and the fourth prince? Could it be that he came to the residence this time to ruin my plans? The old general decided to strike first to gain the initiative. This had always been his character, and it was the only good quality he had inherited from his father. He liked to say what others said and make others speechless, just like when he first met this brat. When your father was alive, he was the prince's teacher. The second prince and the fourth prince were punished by your father to kneel under the scorching sun for 2 hours because they destroyed the crops. Then, do you think that if the fourth prince sits in the imperial court, what good will your Liu family do? Especially if you are a taciturn person who hides everything in your heart? Lu Xiaoyi spread out the Go board and chuckled. Second uncle, isn't it too long ago to talk about a story from more than 20 years ago? People change, it's just a matter of how much. Especially the change from a teenager to an adult. Many old grudges seem like big things, but from another point of view, it's nothing more than that. I heard that the second prince and the fourth prince both support changing the old system. People with such ideas are not too narrow-minded and narrow-minded. They can't break the old system and establish a new one. The old general smiled disdainfully. You and your mother are the same, too stubborn. There are definitely businessmen in this world who are determined to change, and there may also be officials with a conscience. But remember, there is definitely no bold and decisive emperor who will break the old system. The fourth prince and the others want to change because they feel that the country is shaking and unstable in their old age. In essence, this is flattery. Only by flattery can you gain the attention of the present, when you sit on the throne, who will remember the original intention. The next step is how to stabilize the position, how to make thousands of clans pay respect to you, how to pass it on to your descendants. As for reform, what is that? Who will think of it? Even if it is changed, it will only be in the name of reform. And the truth is that the party is divided. The third prince is different. His incompetence is real. It is because of his incompetence that he needs us and can give us the position we want. Xiaoyi, remember, the direction of history has never been decided by the ability of the emperor, but by the ability of the ministers under him. Since we are not in troubled times, We can just be ministers. Why should we seek trouble for ourselves? Lu Xiaoyi nodded, insightful. What you mean is if you can do it, then do it. If you can't do it, then fight. If you can't fight, then change the dynasty. Anyway, no matter who becomes the emperor, there will always be people to do things. The nephew and uncle played chess, as they argued. Before the game was over, the old general could not hold on any longer. His head drooped down bit by bit. Lu Xiaoyi helped him to lie down on the bed. He was old, and a part of his spiritual power was suddenly devoured. It was the most essential and ambitious part of his spiritual power in the past 50 years. It was normal for him to be unable to hold on and fall asleep. 2 hours passed. Just as Lu Xiaoyi was still weighing whether to let the old man sleep like this or wake him up and let him choose, the old man woke up by himself. It was now the middle of the night, less than an hour before the start of the operation. The old man suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Lu Xiaoyi, who was still in front of the chessboard. He closed his eyes again and carefully recalled what had happened to him. Finally, he opened his eyes and looked directly at Lu Xiaoyi. Xiaoyi, you are also a cultivator? Chapter 110. Lu Xiaoyi nodded with a smile. I'm just a beginner. It's a hobby of a young man. I just felt that second uncle couldn't control the trend of the Yao family while keeping your true heart. It was really unreasonable, so I helped second uncle. The old man's eyes widened. Do you know that second uncle's biggest weakness in this life is his indecisiveness? So my previous state was perhaps the ideal state in my dream? But you woke me up from my beautiful dream. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Second uncle, you still know that you're in a dream? Then how can a dream be the same as reality? Walking the wrong path in a dream is just waking up in a cold sweat. If you walk the wrong path in reality, then you'll be the head of an entire family. The old man was already completely awake, but he didn't know how to face his nephew's help. You could also be harming me. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. That's right. If the third prince successfully ascends the throne, then I'll be harming you. But with the previous stab of pain, it probably won't be much. At most, I'll stay where I am, and others will say that I'm unlucky. But if the third prince fails, then I'll be saving you. Don't thank me. This is mother's wish. With my temper, I didn't want to come. The old man angrily said, That's different. For the former, I fought for fate. For the latter, I can only passively wait. I'll be looked down upon and called a coward. The old man hurriedly put on his helmet and armor and took his sword. He snorted and walked away, but when he pushed the door open, he hesitated. Lu Xiaoyi laughed behind him. Ambitious people have their own deeds, and cowards have their own way of living. There's no difference between the two. The worst thing is that an ambitious person crawls like a coward, and a coward learns from an ambitious person. You've already been a coward your whole life, so why not do it for a few more years? In any case, in this life, there's a beginning and an end. When people recall, they'll say, Ferocious general, you've been a coward for a long time. It's better than losing your integrity in your later years. A person's fate is inertia and cannot be easily changed. This is a mysterious concept. If you want to change it, you must have the ability and luck to endure the change. Of course, history would always remember those who succeeded in changing the world, but most of those who failed were never mentioned. This was a terrible misunderstanding, but not many people truly understood it. People always think that repentance is unexpected and can make great contributions, but they don't know the trap. Change needs to be done slowly and gently in the beginning. Only by slowly increasing the stakes can you achieve the results of a single battle. True change came from the will in the depths of one's soul, guiding one to endure and do it. This kind of change that required time to prove itself was true change. Second uncle was a gambling addict. When he was old, he would bet everything on the family. The result could be imagined. The old man didn't know whether to take this step or not. He had to give him a way out. After all, he was an elder, and he had been insulted badly. This unlucky nephew. Lu Xiaoyi took the sword from the old man's hand and weighed it in his hand. It was quite heavy. He couldn't help but tease. Can you still wield such a heavy sword? With your old arms and legs? You'll be a burden when you run away. Take off your armor. I know what you're worried about. If you don't send your troops on time, those cultivators may come knocking on your door. I'll solve this for you. Actually, you don't have to wait too long. Whether it's the third prince or the fourth prince, they won't allow chaos to happen at night. Just wait and see. In less than 2 hours, the result will be clear. You can take a nap. Lu Xiaoyi was in a good mood now that he had taken revenge on the first time he met the old man. Seeing that it was already past 3 in the morning, he turned around and bowed to the old man. Second uncle, I'll go outside to stop them. If you feel unsafe, don't gather the guards to protect yourself. That will make you a bigger target. My suggestion is that you should go to one of your close maidservants and have a good time. It's not easy to find them. Maybe you can leave behind another bloodline for yourself. Seeing the old man sitting at the table and circulating his qi without answering, Lu Xiaoyi reminded him. Second uncle? The old man glared at him. Don't call me second uncle. I'm not your second uncle. You're my second uncle. Lu Xiaoyi walked out of the old man's study room. After a few turns, he came to a place where no one was around. With a leap, he was already on the roof. He was using the Zhangzhuli escape technique. 2 sets of jade tokens were tied to his calf and abdomen. They were used in case he needed to use the 4th gear. He did not go far, but stayed at the side of the high wall of the Yao mansion. This was the place where the cultivator would pass by every time he came. However, he was not sure if the cultivator would come back the same way today, so he could not leave the Yao mansion. The air in Zhaoye City was filled with the smell of anxiety. Birds were alarmed and flew away from time to time. With Lu Xiaoyi's hearing, he could clearly hear the sound of a large number of footsteps on the street far away. It could only be the army. He was so sensitive that he could even feel the slight vibration under his feet. This bunch of fellows had really caused quite a commotion. Even he was starting to wonder if what he had done to his second uncle was wrong. At 5:15 in the morning, in Lu Xiaoyi's ears, an extremely soft sound came from afar. His body floated up, and he was already on top of the familiar wall of the Yao Manor. He was about to leap to the next landing point. This was the Qi-eating cultivator. They could not fly, so they could only use the enlarged version of the Qinggong of Jianghu. When they landed on the roof of the street, they would inevitably make an unnoticeable sound. This time, in the familiar manner, familiar terrain, and familiar foothold, his body was about to jump up, but he didn't jump out because his foot was clamped down by a strong hand. Then, without any warning, he couldn't avoid falling down. In a split second, the only thing the cultivator could do was to keep his body upright so that he would not fall down face first. At the same time, he took out the talisman and touched the weapon buckle on his waist. His reaction was fast, but there was another feeling that was faster than his reaction. From the back door, he felt a chill in his throat. It was a penetrating wound from some kind of weapon. It should be his sword. This was the cultivator's last thought. The other party was not even in the mood to ask him questions. Lu Xiaoyi held onto the wall and swayed. He was dizzy from blood. For a person who often had to kill people, this was really too embarrassing. Even after a long period of special training, killing chickens and ducks, and even going to Pooh City's butcher market as an internship, he could not change his habit of fainting after seeing blood. It was as if some perverted person would lick the edge of the sword after killing someone. However, he had also made progress. It was fine if he swayed, unlike the first time when he hit someone with a brick and fainted himself. This time, he didn't hold back. His ears were still trying hard to search for any small sounds in the vicinity, but his hands quickly touched the body and then put it into the small bag in his arms. He then hid the body behind the cypress tree and continued to wait for the rabbit to appear. He did not like to take captives. It was too troublesome. It was a series of troubles. How could he control the other party without fail? He could force him to speak, but he couldn't force him to call for help or make a false countercharge. How could he judge whether what he said was true or false? How could he not be tempted when the other party told him a big secret? After the other party cooperated, how could he be ruthless enough to go back on his words and kill him? If he let the person go, how could he guarantee that the other party would not come looking for trouble? He admitted that he was a rookie. A rookie should have the self-awareness of a rookie. He should not think too much. He killed the person and touched the body. It was perfect. He would not be merciful to those who used such despicable means on his family. This time it was his second uncle. After knowing about him, would it be his mother's turn next? The only thing he always felt strange about was that he seemed to be very familiar with killing people. Very familiar. It was as if he had done it countless times. Chapter 111. Time passed as the noise outside grew louder and louder. According to Lu Xiaoyi's judgment, there should be at least 2, but no more than 3, cultivators who came to Funwei General's mansion to urge them. This was based on the judgment that the battle would begin within 2 hours. When they found that the garrison army did not arrive as scheduled, cultivators would come to check the situation. However, if the battle dragged on for too long and the general of the garrison army made a judgment of the situation, it would be basically impossible to mobilize the troops with the tiger tally. However, his judgment was wrong. Except for the first unlucky guy who was tricked by him, no one else came. Moreover, he could hear the rumbling of troops, but he did not hear the sound of battle. It should be known that in such a large-scale battle in the mortal world, thousands of people gathered together, and the roaring sound could be heard all over the city. But now, more than an hour had passed, and there was no sound of battle at all. Was it because they had gone to the ceremonial hall? No one dared to rashly go out to gather information. Even the gangsters who liked to fish in troubled waters and take advantage of the chaos didn't dare to do so. The people of the imperial capital were all very politically aware. They knew when they could go out and when they couldn't. In a situation like today, if they went out and encountered a large army, they would be shot by arrows and spears. They wouldn't even be able to redress their grievances if they died. Just as he was wondering, there was a loud cheer. Faintly, the word "long live" became clearer and closer. Outside the good political square, several yamen runners sounded gongs and rode horses, shouting in unison. By the will of heaven, the Emperor of Heavenly Strategies decrees. The title of the country has been changed, and there are evildoers causing trouble. Peace shall be granted to the world with the power of thunder. The shouts were heard, and there were also cheers from the big houses in the good political square. Lu Xiaoyi immediately understood that all of this was actually a trap. The Emperor of Heavenly Strategies was the old emperor. He faked his death and deceived those who were ready to make trouble. Then, before he died, he would catch them all and pave the way for the real successor. This trick was not new, but every time it was used, it was very useful. After all, the position was too tempting. Knowing that no more cultivators would come, the overall situation was set. Only a fool would go and make trouble now. Who would listen? The Heavenly Strategy Emperor had been on the throne for nearly 30 years. His prestige was so great that no one dared to go against his will. When he passed by second uncle's courtyard, he saw that the door was wide open. The old man was sitting on a chair in the middle of the courtyard. He was clad in armor, and his sword was placed across his knees. However, his eyes were lifeless and his face was devoid of color. No matter how bored Lu Xiaoyi was, he didn't want to attack him now. He sighed and walked towards his own courtyard. It was time to eat. In the imperial city, in the golden imperial palace, there was a majestic old man in a dragon robe and a long sword on the ground. Under the white jade stairs, 3 middle-aged princes were kneeling on the ground, especially the one on the left. He was trembling as he lay there. The dozens of ministers beside him were silent. These were all smart people. They would not rashly interfere in the affairs of the royal family. If it was not for the old emperor's personal decree, they would still be hiding at home and enjoying the scenery. A head of the eunuchs trotted over and presented him with a scroll. The old emperor didn't even look at it. Read. The head of the eunuchs knew that the emperor wanted everyone present to know. Thus, he read aloud. The Minister of Internal Affairs, Huang Hui, committed suicide by swallowing gold at home. The Minister of Personnel, Duan Chong, was captured outside the drum gate. The Vice Minister of Personnel, Qian Zikai, was killed in the chaos. The Right General, Cheng Qian, was captured by his subordinates. The Bandit General, Zhou Wenyuan, surrendered at the last minute. The Uni General, Hua Mantian, is stubbornly resisting the purge. The head of the eunuchs read out a long list of names. Everyone present was shocked and frightened. They had never thought that the third prince, who was usually laughing and joking, would actually have such great rallying power. Or were these actually the forces that opposed the reform? After a series of recitations, there were actually dozens of people scattered all over the place. The old emperor glared at the ministers present. They are the ones who jumped out. The rest of you are just a bystander. There is no difference in the nature of it. His words frightened the ministers so much that they knelt down and admitted that they had committed a grave crime. The old emperor did not accuse them wrongly. However, when it came to the royal family's affairs, there were some things that could not be said or done. The old emperor was just trying to scare them. No matter how old he was, he would not hold them accountable. They were just a group of monkeys that he wanted to punish to warn the monkeys. He just stared at the eunuch and said, "In the past half a month, you must have found out the people who colluded with them. Is there anyone on the list who plotted this rebellion?" The head of the eunuch kowtowed and said, "There are some discrepancies between the list and the actual situation. There are only 3 people on the list. The Marquis of Ijo, Tian Fuchu, did not participate in the rebellion. He is suspected to have escaped from Zhaoya City and is being hunted by the police. Yang Fuma, the Marquis of Yang Fuchu, admitted that he plotted the rebellion by tying himself up in Dawang Temple before the coup. The Fenway general, Yao Jidong, did not mobilize the garrison as promised. He committed suicide in the court. The Emperor of Heavenly Strategies sneered. So they're the weaklings? The weaklings are just right. Third Prince, look at the people you found. Is there anyone who is useful? If we really hand the country over to you, will they be able to support us when we are in danger? Since they had the intention to rebel, they should be executed without mercy. However, considering that these people were not rebelling against him, but a fight between the princes, it did not seem appropriate to use treason as a punishment. Those who had truly taken this step, of course, should be executed. However, these few who had shrunk back at the last moment were a different matter altogether. As an emperor, he must understand people's hearts. He could not blindly rely on killing to solve problems. He must set an example. He could not be too tough on those who repented. Otherwise, if such things happen again in the future, everyone would know that there was no way out and would fight to the death. That would be the mistake of the emperor. Fourth Prince, you deal with these people. The old emperor gave this problem to his son, the future emperor. He wanted to test his son's character one last time. The fourth prince kowtowed. Was there need to think about such a simple problem? Of course, it was time to show his mercy. He had endured for decades. How could he make a mistake at the last step? Reporting to father, the Marquis of Ijo, Tian Fuchu, should be pursued. He escaped at night without any remorse. He should be detained and punished for plotting a rebellion. Yang Fuma is a member of the imperial family. He knows how to rein in the horse at the edge of the cliff and abandon the darkness for the light. He can be ordered to study at home. Whether he will rise in the future depends on his performance. Ferocious General Yao Jidong can understand the disaster that war brings to the people. He can stay upright and not cross the line. Killing cultivators can show his intention. I think that it is enough to reprimand him in court and take away his tiger tally. He can keep his official position and see what happens in the future. Anyway, it was an idle position. He could use it to show his tolerance. Chapter 112. The old emperor nodded in satisfaction and returned to the throne room with the help of an old man behind him. His face was ashen, and he was defeated like a piece of paper. The old man behind him frowned. "Your Majesty, you don't have much time left. You have to hurry. I'll have to trouble you to look after me." The old emperor took a deep breath and said, "Taoist, everything else is under control except for the precinct of court. I've spent so much effort and money over the past few decades. I didn't expect these people to be the ones who jumped in at the last moment. Taoist, please tell me, did I do anything wrong?" The old man sneered. "I've told you before, don't think that the power of the mortal world can fight against the cultivators. You think that these powers can fight against the cultivators, but the result is that most of the people in the precinct of court are more loyal to Taoism. You have to know that only cultivators can fight against the cultivators. And the ones who will help you in the end are the cultivators. Your country is worthless in the eyes of the cultivators. The old emperor smiled bitterly and called the fourth prince over. After I die, everything will follow your orders. Remove the precinct of court and appoint a state preceptor appointed by the Taoists. In the future, anything related to cultivation in the country will be handled by the state preceptor. We will not interfere. The fourth prince wrote it down with tears in his eyes. The old emperor looked at the old man and pleaded. Zhaoya City is safe now. The only thing that can't be controlled is the cultivators. On account of our decades of friendship, please help me one last time. This was also his last sentence. Even with the support of the Taoists behind him, no one could help him now that his time was up. Lu Xiaoyi was bored alone in the Yao residence. Second uncle had been taken away by the palace guards. No one knew if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but he wasn't worried. He guessed that he wouldn't die, right? While he was bored, he suddenly sensed something and looked up. He saw a flying object that he had never seen before. It was as big as a table and shaped like a disc, just like the flying saucer he remembered from his previous life. However, it wasn't big. Most importantly, there was a Taoist standing on it. This was a real Foundation establishment cultivator. Lu Xiaoyi's intuition told him so. How would it feel if he could fly in the sky one day? Everyone had a dream of flying, but only cultivators could make their dreams come true. The Foundation establishment cultivator used his mana to spread the sound waves in all directions. Mortals could not hear it, but only cultivators with spiritual energy could hear it. I am Lin Quan, and I am here to inform all my fellow cultivators in Night Reflection City. Cultivators and mortals were different from each other. Cultivators of the Yi Kingdom did not participate in court affairs. This was an iron law. Today, those who participated in the rebellion have all been executed. They should be made an example of. Life is short and bitter. Cultivation is difficult. Using a useful body to pursue the Tao of nature is the lonely path of cultivation. Entering the mortal world and causing chaos is not something we should do. The helpers of evil have already been executed. Fortunately, most of the cultivators were able to keep their true intentions and did not participate rashly. Since that is the case, Lin Quan has good news to tell everyone. I hope that everyone will be able to keep it in their sleeves. The Taoist gaze swept across Lu Xiaoyi. It was as if the Taoist had seen through him, but Lu Xiaoyi did not feel anything. He was only guessing where the prize came from. A month ago, a flying boat from beyond the heavens stopped at Feng Huang Mountain outside Night Reflection City to pick up the fated people to the place of cultivation. This is the beginning of immortality. 10 years later, there will also be a flying boat to pick up the fated people at Wangding Mountain outside Shangjing City of the Liang Kingdom. As long as you cultivators can sense the Foundation establishment, you will have the chance to escape from the cage and go to the upper bound. The road to immortality is right in front of you. No matter how obsessed you are with the mortal world, it is just a handful of dung. We cultivators should be independent and strong. Although Night Reflection City is beautiful, it is not our hometown. Let's disperse. This was the Taoist promise to the late emperor. He gave hope to the cultivators in Night Reflection City who heard the news and took the opportunity to divert their attention from the cultivators who died in the fight for the imperial power. The upper bound was very clear. It was a flying boat that would take people away from this low-level cultivation world to another place with more spiritual opportunity. It was a beautiful wish, but the prerequisite was extremely harsh. Was it so easy for a rogue cultivator to build his foundation? It was just the privilege of being a disciple of a sect. It was just at this time, the Taoist had revealed the news to everyone and gave them hope. It was an unattainable goal. It was like a carrot hanging in front of a donkey. But no matter what, under the impact of such news, some cultivators who had ulterior motives gave up the idea of staying in Night Reflection City to cause trouble. After all, immortality was their biggest wish. Lu Xiaoyi was also a little excited when he heard this. The upper bound? What kind of scenery would that be? It was very desirable, But to him, contentment was the most suitable state of mind. If he did not sense the foundation establishment, everything else would be a daydream. But once he achieved the foundation establishment, he would have an extra 180 years of lifespan. Whether it was in this world or the upper bound, there was no difference. The advantage of going to the upper bound was the possibility of further improvement. But control Dan? Lu Xiaoyi would never think of a goal that was too far away from him. It was meaningless. Besides, with his mother and Aunt Kai around, he could not bear to leave them to enjoy immortality alone. What was the point of living like that? Night Reflection City regained its order, but all of this had nothing to do with Lu Xiaoyi. Even if the Yao family wanted to hold a small banquet after his second uncle returned, it had nothing to do with him. It was not that he was not invited, but that he was too lazy to attend such an event. The city still could not be casually strolled around. The curfew would continue for a period of time until the fourth prince's throne was fully stabilized. A large number of messengers were sent out, spreading the news to all parts of the country. This was an inevitable phenomenon when a new emperor came to power. If there was laughter, there would be tears. This was life. An exquisite banquet table was placed in the small living room. This was something that General Fenway had requested during the family reunion. All the dishes were of the best quality. As for whether the banquet was complete or not, the old man did not care. This was the first time in the Yao family's many decades of life that such a banquet was held. Everyone was shrewd. Regardless of whether it was the madams or the young ladies who were well versed in politics, or the men who had many connections outside, they could all tell something from this banquet. Coupled with the fact that the old master had successfully passed the trial and the changes in the capital, it also explained something. That low-profile and taciturn young master-nephew of theirs. Could it be that he was actually someone who knew the heavens? Of all the people, other than the old master, the ones who knew the most were his three sons. They knew of the old master's plans, and were always on tenterhooks because of it. They could not sleep at night. News came from outside, and the three sons were already preparing for their funeral. But who would have thought that there would be a small twist in the plot? They still did not know what the reason was, and the old master was not willing to tell them. But from the banquet today, some things were on the verge of being revealed. These are not things that Lu Xiaoyi needed to care about. Once a person started to cultivate, they would not care about the things in the mortal world. Lu Xiaoyi had not experienced the baptism of the mortal world in this life, but he seemed to have experienced a lot in his previous life. Coupled with the wandering in the universe, the current him only wanted to have a relatively peaceful life and to have family that he truly cared about by his side. Chapter 113. How could it not be a lifetime? Longevity, power, wealth. What was the point of thinking so much? He was fiddling with the new items. Although he was only in the middle stage of Chi Eater, this person's wealth was not as shabby as the row cultivators in Pooh City. Sure enough, those who could survive in the night were the cream of the crop. There were a few bottles of elixirs and dozens of talismans. There was no cultivation method, but there was a foundation establishment experience of a Chi Eater cultivator passed down from a certain sect. In terms of value, it was not as good as Liang Quangren, but it was above most row cultivators. However, what Lu Xiaoyi was interested in was not the elixirs and talismans, but the experience. He had been cultivating for 4 years and was basically in a state of exploring alone. This was actually the state of most rogue cultivators. He was too lazy to seek refuge with a certain sect. Firstly, he did not know. Secondly, it did not matter. And thirdly, he did not want to lose face. So what if it was longevity? Face was more important than longevity. This was Lu Xiaoyi's hidden attitude towards life. Although this was a cultivation world, it was not easy to see cultivators with a sect background. Some potential cultivators in the Chi eating stage were not allowed to go out easily. At this stage, the sect would only invest in them, but they would not get anything in return. They ate and drank from the sect and used the sect's resources, yet they still went out to court death. This was not allowed. In any case, Lu Xiaoyi had met 2 cultivators with sect backgrounds. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to befriend them. Instead, he sent them to the Western Paradise. This was fate. A foundation establishment cultivator could come out at will, but such a big shot like the one in the sky just now, how could it be easy to meet them? Birds do not talk with insects. Eagles do not fight with chickens. Humans do not fight with dogs. They are not on the same level. Opportunities were mysterious and unpredictable. Since Lu Xiaoyi's opportunity with the red thread worm, it seemed that all his luck had left him. There were no more encounters worth mentioning. For example, if he met a young lady from a big sect or an old man from a certain sect, would they have nothing better to do than to tease a rogue cultivator like him? There was an invisible wall that completely divided the cultivation world into several spaces. In a world of rogue cultivators, you could only see rogue cultivators forever. When you met a cultivator of a higher level, it often didn't mean that luck had come, but that disaster had befallen you. Just like monk Qing Mu and the Taoist who jumped over the wall. It was precisely because of this that things like insights were often more precious than cultivation techniques to rogue cultivators. Not only could it let you know the how, it could also let you know the why. It went without saying that the experience of someone who had been through it would be a great guide for a newbie. Lu Xiaoyi began to read the book carefully. He was not in a hurry to go back because the rebellion in Nightly City had just been settled. There were many disloyal people scattered in the city. He was not afraid of those mortal outlaws, but he was afraid that if there were still cultivators who were still holding a grudge against his second uncle's betrayal, they might have a backup plan. For people like second uncle, even if he was really harmed, the imperial court would not pursue the matter too much. They might even think that it was a good thing that he died, so that everyone would not feel awkward. He planned to stay for another 10 days. After the new emperor's ceremony, the order would be established and the evil would be wiped out. Cultivators would leave the city to pursue their own futures before leaving. When he returned, he could give a perfect explanation to his mother, lest the old lady would say that he did not put in effort and did everything half-heartedly. Since he had nothing to do, he could study the book and find out the reason why he was having difficulties in the later stage of qi eating. Qi eating was also known as qi training, qi nourishing, qi waiting, qi benefiting, and so on. There were many names, but in fact, they all had the same meaning. It was the process of cultivators who had to start to cultivate by eating the spiritual vigor of heaven and earth. In the early stage of cultivation, cultivators placed great importance on the dantian, and the form of spiritual power in the dantian was used to differentiate between realms. For example, the dantian of a cultivator in the qi eating stage was a gaseous dantian. Relatively speaking, the gaseous state was also the physical state with the lowest spiritual vigor. It was the first gaseous state. When the spiritual vigor in a cultivator's dantian became denser and denser, under the combined influence of cultivation techniques, pills, external objects, opportunities, luck, environment, mental state, and other factors, the gaseous dantian would undergo a mutation. It was like the accumulation of clouds in the sky, producing rain. Finally, the gaseous cloud-shaped spiritual vigor would turn into a clear spring, completing the qualitative change from gaseous to liquid. This was the foundation establishment stage. In this world, the foundation establishment stage was known as the foundation establishment stage. From a completely new perspective, it was known as the perception stage. It was also known as the spiritual sensing stage, the zither heart stage, and the returning to childhood stage. They all had the same meaning, referring to the various mystical aspects of the foundation establishment stage. It was the second gaseous state. With the growth of one's cultivation, the dantian of a foundation establishment cultivator would become more viscous and refined. One day, under the combined influence of countless external and internal factors, the liquid dantian would condense into a solid state, and the spiritual vigor would also become more substantial. This was the controlled Dan stage. The controlled Dan stage was also known as the Jin Dan stage, the cloud soaring stage, and the Yuan Dan stage. This was already the peak of the initial stages of a cultivator. Even in the so-called upper realm, it was the backbone of cultivation. If it was in the cultivation world where Lu Xiaoyi was from, it would be in existence like an ancestor. He had heard of it before, but it was only in legends. Right now, Lu Xiaoyi's dantian was a ball of misty, spiritual vigor. It was far from being viscous and was in the process of accumulating. However, this process seemed to be somewhat slow and seemed to take a long time. He hoped to find a place that would be helpful to him in this book. Intuition told him that if this continued, the chances of success would not be high. The entire book was called Looking Back. It was not clear which sect it came from, because it was not stated clearly. The entire book was a review of his understanding of cultivation during the process of consuming qi, all the way until he succeeded in establishing his foundation. As for how to gather qi more effectively, he had not found a solution. After all, this senior might not have experienced too much trouble. However, he saw a few very interesting problems on how to establish his foundation. According to this senior, whether one could succeed in establishing their foundation or whether they could succeed in establishing their foundation depended on many circumstances. In terms of methodology, there were two ways to establish one's foundation. The first was to consume a foundation establishment pill, which turned clouds into rain and acted as a catalyst. It could induce the spiritual vigor cloud in one's dantian to fall and turn into rain. This would eliminate the need for opportunities, luck, environment, and other completely uncontrollable influences. If one placed their hopes on a flash of inspiration, the chances of success would be so low that it would make one's hair stand on end. The other method was the ancient method, which was purely a flash of inspiration or a sudden impulse. All kinds of external and internal factors would converge at a certain point in time to form a combined force. This method was actually the most natural and also the best method because it followed the will of heaven and abandoned the influence of man. This was the original intention of Taoism. The temporary advantages were not obvious, but they were very important. As one's cultivation increased, it would have a certain impact on one's growth. For example, when one formed their core or formed their nascent soul, if all other conditions were the same, there was a difference between using the ancient method and consuming a pill. Even the slightest difference would have a profound impact on a cultivator. The higher one's cultivation level, the more important it would be. This was the importance of the Tao Foundation. Chapter 114. Of course, for starving beggars, the most important thing was how to fill their stomachs, not whether they would have high blood pressure or high blood sugar in the future. The disadvantage was that the time needed to wait for this point was so far away that there was no way to predict it at all. Lu Xiaoyi had a foundation establishment pill from Liang Quangren's corpse. After years of pondering, he finally figured out the use of this pill. It wasn't a marrow-cleansing pill, nor was it a life-prolonging pill. It was the foundation establishment pill that all rogue cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. Regarding this, he was secretly delighted. The things that many loose cultivators couldn't obtain even after working their entire lives were obtained by him without any effort. He was very satisfied. He also didn't want to try the ancient method of foundation establishment. He didn't have any plans for the future. Taking one step at a time was the attitude of a lazy person like him. There were very few examples of the ancient method of foundation establishment, so it was only briefly mentioned in his experience. However, regarding the foundation establishment pill, this senior described it very carefully. He even introduced the ingredients and effects of the foundation establishment pill clearly. He was also a tireless teacher. Lu Xiaoyi knew that foundation establishment pills were divided into several grades. It wasn't absolute. Some said it was divided into 3 grades, while others said it was divided into 5 and 9 grades. It was just like the schools in his previous life. There were vocational schools, ordinary universities, provincial key schools, 2111s, 9585s. However, what Lu Xiaoyi didn't know was that foundation establishment pills were also divided into different grades. There were only 2 grades, finished product and waste. The finished product was easy to understand. It was the success of foundation establishment. All the spiritual energy turned into liquid. As for its potential, there was no standard in the current cultivation world that could measure it. There's also a type of waste, which was between success and failure. If you said it was a failure, it would start to turn into liquid. But if you said it was a success, it wouldn't completely turn into liquid. In other words, a cycle had been formed in the dantian. The spiritual vigor in the gaseous state and the liquid state were equally divided. It was just like in the natural world, when water vapor arose from a lake under the sun, it would form clouds. Then, the clouds would rain and return to the lake. This was an awkward cycle. The gas was neither gas nor liquid. It had part of the abilities of a building foundation stage cultivator, but it could not be fully utilized. It was a waste foundation. There were a lot of methods from the sect on how to avoid destroying one's foundation. Some were related to the circulation of cultivation methods, and some were related to external help. This was especially important for rogue cultivators. This was because most rogue cultivators had destroyed their foundation. If it was a disciple of a sect, they would rather destroy their foundation and start all over again than allow their disciple to fall into such an endless cycle. Lu Xiaoyi clicked his tongue, thinking about the scene of his dantian being half lake water and half clouds. He couldn't help but wonder how much it would affect a cultivator's lifespan. After imagining the scene of foundation establishment, he still had to return to reality and continue to look between the lines for questions on how to increase the accumulation of spiritual power. Perhaps this senior wouldn't specifically talk about this issue, but there must be a connection. 3 days later, he finally had an answer after reading through the entire experience several times. He found 2 paths. The first one was that he needed to refine the quality of his existing spiritual power. The more refined the spiritual power, the more spiritual power could be contained in the dantian of the same volume. Only then would it be able to induce rain from qi. Just like the clouds, some could rain heavily, while some could only rain from the sun. It wasn't just a matter of the thickness of the clouds, it was also a matter of the density of the water vapor in the clouds. This wasn't just a simple compression, it was a process of removing impurities and preserving essence, refining and refining. To do this, he didn't need a specialized refining cultivation method. He only needed to circulate the foundation cultivation method. To him, it was to circulate the jade, clear, central imperial edict intermittently, repeatedly polishing, removing impurities, and leaving behind the essence. This was also a function that every foundation cultivation method had to have. For the widely circulated jade, clear, central imperial edict that had undergone the test of time, there wasn't any problem. It was just that Lu Xiaoyi had blindly pursued the quantity of spiritual power in his previous cultivation and neglected the investment in this aspect. The second path was the problem of having a single source of spiritual power. If it was in the upper cultivation world, this wouldn't be a problem. This was because the spiritual power from nature was always the source of a cultivator's power. It was the right path. Therefore, the cultivators of the upper realm didn't have the problem of having a single source of spiritual power. It was precisely because they only absorbed spiritual power from nature that they became stronger. This was a problem unique to the lower cultivation world. As the spiritual power from nature was thin, the cultivators were forced to look for various substitutes, such as pills, spiritual items, or the use of biological spiritual power like Lu Xiaoyi. These substitutes didn't have the same universal effect as the spiritual power from nature. Therefore, it was like a mortal taking medicine. After taking too much of it, they would develop antibodies to certain medicines and develop a tolerance. The result was that the medicine's efficacy would become lower and lower. The solution was also very simple. Change the medicine, no longer using the red thread worm to absorb the spiritual power. Instead, change it to something else such as pills, spiritual stones, spiritual gathering formations, or the spiritual power carried in the bodies of other living beings. In this regard, the senior who had left behind his insights gave a very pertinent suggestion. He believed that if one had the ability to obtain resources to exchange for other spiritual items, it would be better to solve the problem once and for all. Use spiritual stones to set up formations and directly absorb the spiritual power from nature. The reason was very simple. Only the spiritual power from nature was truly harmless and didn't require time to detoxify. Refining it was the easiest, as long as one could support the consumption of spiritual stones to set up formations. This could also prevent the absorption of spiritual items after a period of time and prevent them from continuing to change. There were two basic methods of absorbing spiritual power through formations. Apart from the upgraded, enlarged, and ultimate versions, there were only the spiritual gathering formation and the spiritual guiding formation. Lu Xiaoyi had a rough understanding of these things after years of contact. The core of the spiritual gathering formation was the spiritual power from the spiritual stones that were used to set up the formation. In fact, it was no different from holding a spiritual stone in one's hand. However, the effect was much better and the absorption speed was faster. Of course, the consumption of spiritual stones was also much faster. The spiritual guiding formation was different. It used the formation to gather the spiritual power from the surrounding space to increase the intensity of the spiritual power in a specific space within the formation. In essence, the spiritual power that the cultivator absorbed was the spiritual power of nature, not the spiritual power from the spiritual stones themselves. It was needless to say which one to choose. Even the disciples of a sect would find it difficult to withstand the consumption of spiritual power from the spiritual gathering formation. To achieve this, not only did he need to learn about formations, he also needed to convert spirit stones. Fortunately, he had brought almost all of the red thread worms with him on this trip. It wasn't that he was far-sighted, but that he had simply used them as grenades in a fight. This was his final trump card, which was equivalent to throwing away all the resources he had. Lu Xiaoyi was relieved that he had solved the problem of his slow cultivation progress. After some careful calculation, he realized that he had gained a lot from this trip to Nightly City. He had obtained some information that he might not necessarily use. He had a deeper understanding of the floating luck in his sea of consciousness. Now, he had found the root cause of his slow cultivation progress. It was worth it, and there was nothing to be dissatisfied about. Chapter 115. For the next few days, he could at least go out for a walk during the day. Zhaoye City was indeed incomparable to Pu City. It was full of worldly affairs that could make people intoxicated. However, Lu Xiaoyi was not someone who would be easily intoxicated. Although he had a vague memory of his previous life, he had inherited a carefree attitude of not caring about anything. He drank wine and ate meat, but he would forget about them once he left the restaurant. He did not go to places of debauchery, because such places of entertainment were banned before and after the new emperor ascended the throne. It was a pity. His family in Pu City was very strict. His mother and Aunt Kaihong were keeping an eye on him. Although they did not care if he went out for a long run, if he stayed in the brothels, he would probably be reprimanded the next day. He stayed in Zhaoye City until the 8th day, the 2nd day after the new emperor ascended the throne. Lu Xiaoyi took 2 horses out of Yao Mansion and never returned. He had always scoffed at worldly etiquette. A cultivator should be free and easy like a cultivator. Saying goodbye in person would mean countless troubles, banquets, letters, local specialties, and possibly countless heartfelt words to persuade him to improve himself. It was too tiring. This time, he left the city through the south gate. Before returning to Pu City, he wanted to go to the market on Fenghuang Mountain outside the city to exchange for some spiritual stones. Since he was out, he would try his best to settle the matter so that he could cultivate in peace. Although he was still a rookie in cultivation, his 4 years of cultivation experience had turned him into an experienced rookie. He also had a basic understanding of the cultivation markets in Yi Kingdom. These were all obtained from Hu Yong and a few people in the circle of rogue cultivators in Pu City. They would occasionally meet to exchange their cultivation experience and knowledge. During the contact, Lu Xiaoyi gradually learned that there were 4 to 5 cultivation markets in Yi Kingdom. As the capital of the country, it was the place where rogue cultivators gathered the most. Of course, there would be a market near the Night Reflection City. Moreover, the scale of the market was not small. It was one of the middle to low-level markets in the night reflection country. It was also Lu Xiaoyi's target this time. Over the years, he had accumulated a lot of red thread worms, and it was time to cash them out. These things were living creatures, and they could not be preserved for long periods of time like spiritual corpses. Putting them in the spirit beast pouch would consume them. Without the environment of the Gobi Desert, the red thread worm's spiritual vigor would weaken after 2 to 3 years. Moreover, these things would fight with each other in the spirit beast pouch, which was very troublesome. Feng Huang Mountain was the place where Taoist Lin Quan said there were flying boats from outer space to pick up cultivators. It was also a large market outside Night Sunshine City. Before Lu Xiaoyi got close, he could already feel the hustle and bustle of the market. It was a bustling scene. There are so many cultivators in the night reflection country. Lu Xiaoyi quickly understood. The cultivators gathered here were not only from the night reflection country, but also from Liang, Daming, Zhongwu, Chao Nei, Nanyu, Tengchong, Luwei, and more than a dozen other countries. Basically, all the countries in the cultivation world were included. There is only one reason for them to gather here, and that was for the once-a-decade flying boats to ferry people. From this point of view, the mastermind of the flying boats to ferry people was not a sect or force from this low-level cultivation world. It should be from the so-called upper realm. Their purpose was to recruit talents. After all, to be able to build a foundation in such a barren land meant that they had enough potential. What did the cultivation world rely on to develop? Of course, talents. This was the reason why the upper realm would come down to harvest people every 10 years. The natives were also happy to be harvested. Going to the upper realm meant better conditions for cultivation, more spiritual vigor, more resources, and a brighter future. Why not? When they were successful, they could even return to their home planet. For the sects and forces, they were also willing to send their disciples away. This was the glory of their orthodoxy. Moreover, if some of the people left, the remaining resources would be easier to distribute. It was a very practical thing. Once every 10 years, these people would rush to the landing site of the flying boat. Some of them were lone travelers, but of course, most of them were from sections. They were also the most well-informed ones. They brought their families and friends with them. Except for a few who wanted to board the flying boat and leave, most of them wanted to take this opportunity to see the flying boat that was said to be able to float in the void. They wanted to see the cultivation environment of the foreign land, get in touch with the cultivators of different countries, and the cultivation orthodoxies of different sects. This cultivation world was relatively isolated in terms of communication. Due to the lack of spiritual vigor and the scarcity of resources, there were very few confrontations between major cultivation orthodoxies. The outstanding ones, the ones with potential, and the ones with a bright future had all gone to the upper realm. What was the point of leaving behind a group of dwarves to compete? However, the human race was a race that longed for communication. Therefore, the flying boat gathering that happened once every 10 years became a carnival for the cultivators of the entire world. When the flying boats left, it was not the end, but the beginning. Therefore, Phoenix Mountain became the largest open-air market in the cultivation world. All kinds of transactions took place here. Some were open, some were secret, some were deceitful, and so on. Every time the flying boat left, it would last for several months. This was also the reason why almost all the cultivators left the city when Taoist Lin Quan called for help in Night Illumination City. They did not go to other places, but came here to try their luck. Under such circumstances, Lu Xiaoyi's so-called huge sum of money and thousands of red thread worms would probably cause a bloody conflict if he brought them to Crane Mountain. Wealth that would make people's hearts beat faster and their eyes red with envy was also an ordinary transaction here. The cultivators here came from all over the cultivation world, and most of them were disciples of sects with roots and orthodoxies. In front of these people, he was just a bumpkin who had never seen the world. Lu Xiaobao. The original market in Phoenix Mountain was built in a valley. It was big and flat. However, after the cultivators of the entire cultivation world swarmed in, it was too late to rebuild it. Therefore, The open-air flea market was the mainstream. The market could be a flea market, but people could not be fleas. The orthodoxies of the sects that maintained the market would do their best to do so. This involved the reputation of the orthodoxy and also related to the commission income. It was absolutely not something to be taken lightly. There were cultivators at the entrance of the valley. They did not reject rogue cultivators, but mortals. In the past, there were no restrictions on mortals coming in and out of the Phoenix Mountain Valley. However, during this period of time, the number of cultivators had skyrocketed. If curious mortals were allowed to come in, it would be too crowded, which was what the owner did not want to see. As soon as Lu Xiaoyi entered the valley, he was shocked. Looking around, he saw that there were thousands of people. And this was because he couldn't use his perception at all. He couldn't tell how many people there were. Because everyone here was a cultivator, they all had methods to prevent others from spying on them. Therefore, as soon as the area was expanded, his perception would immediately fail. It was like an ant mixed in a herd of animals. How could he count how many lions, tigers, and wild wolves there were? Before, he had been lamenting that he had not seen many talents of the sections. Now, there were thousands of them, many of whom had really built the Taoist foundation. It was too much for the eyes to take in. Chapter 116. As he plunged into the sea of cultivation, he reminded himself to only look with his eyes, listen with his ears, and do nothing else. After the first day, the only feeling he had was that he was in a daze. It was like a grocery store owner who had been idling in a small village. He thought he had some stock, but when he entered the Forbidden City Museum or the Louvre, he could not help but lament when he saw thousands of cultivation methods, secret techniques, tools, spiritual beasts, pills, talismans, and so on. The so-called cultivation was not something a poor person could afford. He was a little puzzled as to how he had gotten to where he was now. To be able to survive in such a glorious and vast cultivation world, how many sect disciples could he kill? It was unbelievable. After a day of shopping, he was a little tired. It was not his body that was tired, but his eyes hurt from looking at all the treasures. He found a slightly empty corner and sat down. He closed his eyes and calmed himself down. 2 hours later, he opened his eyes and his breathing returned to normal. There was a street stall several feet away from him. The stall owner had just completed a transaction and was in a good mood. Taking advantage of the free time at night, he expressed his concern. He asked, "Little brother, are you all right?" Lu Xiaoyi politely returned the greeting. "I'm fine, just a little dizzy." The middle-aged stall owner laughed. "That's normal. It's too normal. I think you're an itinerant cultivator, aren't you?" Lu Xiaoyi did not hide it. There were many itinerant cultivators in this place. No one would want to talk to someone like him who was not out of the ordinary. "That's right. Senior, you have a good eye." The stall owner laughed. "What's there to see? Looking at your situation, you're a typical rogue cultivator. Let me be frank with you. This place is actually not suitable for rogue cultivators like you to come in. Do you understand what I mean?" Lu Xiaoyi nodded. He did not think that this person's words were offensive. It was the truth. "It's my first time here. I didn't come here on purpose. It's just a coincidence. I was passing by Nightly City, but I didn't expect to see such a big scene. At first, I thought that even though I couldn't afford it, it would still be good to have an eye craving. But now it seems that this eye craving isn't that easy." After a day, the stall owner had gained quite a lot. Thus, he had the desire to chat and show off. If it was another time and place, he wouldn't have bothered to give pointers to such a small rogue cultivator. "That's right. You're blinded by your flowers. You treat cultivation as money." The things in the world of cultivation were endless and fascinating. To put it bluntly, there are only a few kinds of things in the world of cultivation, especially people like you who don't have much experience. You can't wait to buy everything to your heart's content. In fact, it's your inner demons. In the future, when I cultivated, I would always think that some cultivation method I saw in a market seemed to be more suitable for me. In a battle of magical powers, he would think that a certain talisman from the market square was formidable. If this continued, he would start to doubt his own foundation. Therefore, he might as well not come. In any case, I can't afford it. Messing up my mind is not beneficial to my cultivation. Lu Xiaoyi knew that this person's words were crude, but not crude. Even if there were tens of thousands of cultivation techniques here, how many could he cultivate at the same time? There were countless talismans, but how many could he throw with both hands? There were as many elixirs as the sea, but how many could he swallow in a day? Thank you for your guidance, Senior. I'll just take a look. If I were to leave just like that, wouldn't that be too cowardly? The stall owner nodded. You could take a look as long as you stay true to your heart. But it doesn't matter to you. You can't afford it anyway, so what? Don't think that this place is too high and mighty. In essence, what's the difference between this place and a mortal's market? Swindling, selling shoddy goods as good, passing off fish eyes as pearls, lacking in weight, there's everything. If you really want to buy and sell something, you'd better go to the big stalls in the center with the sex Tao symbol. You might not be able to get a bargain, but you'd definitely not be cheated. After the stall owner finished speaking, he probably felt that he had said too much. Therefore, he closed his eyes and rested his mind, no longer speaking. Lu Xiaoyi thanked him again. Taking advantage of the night, he began his search again. This stall owner was right. What he said was true. There are thousands of stalls. To look at them one by one and compare their strengths and weaknesses, their prices, and whether they were useful to him, this was an impossible task for someone like him who had limited experience. It would be strange if he didn't fall into a trap. If he wanted to look for treasures here, how much cultivation knowledge and experience would he need? It would tire his heart and mind. And in the end, he wouldn't be able to find anything good. This shouldn't be his choice, and it wasn't what he was good at. What was he good at? According to his own actual situation, he could find the right direction, persevere in cultivation, and add his own understanding and changes in cultivation. How much worse could he be compared to others? He had already killed 2 people. This was an affirmation of himself. After all, he had only been in contact with cultivation for a short time. Even if his mentality was not bad, he was still shocked when he suddenly came into contact with a myriad cultivator fair. It was like Granny Lu entering the Grandview Garden. No, it was like entering the Imperial Garden. Fortunately, he was now alert and no longer had the tendency to indulge. It could also be considered a rare experience in a state of mind. As he walked through the stalls, he mainly had to overcome 2 things. Temptation. First, medicinal pills. It wasn't a pill for him to consume, but a pill for mortals to consume. He had always wanted to buy some medicinal pills suitable for his mother and Aunt Kai, but he had always been hesitant. It wasn't that he was reluctant to spend the spirit stones, but he was afraid of causing unmanageable trouble. Spiritual vigor was a great tonic for cultivators, but might not be so for mortals. Even someone as strong as Liang Quangren would die if he took too much. Then, what was the most suitable dosage for different mortals? Would there be side effects? These were all things that he had to consider. There were many medicinal pills in these stalls that could prolong one's life by 10 or 20 years, but how could he dare to buy them? It wasn't that these medicinal pills were necessarily fake, but for different people, men and women, old and young, strong and weak, basic diseases and individual resistance. How could one medicinal pill be used in the world? Lu Xiaoyi looked at countless of them, but in the end, he still decided that the spiritual vigor he had been studying for the 2 old people every day was more reliable. At the very least, he could grasp the severity. If he wasn't proficient in alchemy and couldn't specialize in the art of life, it would be impossible to extend the lifespan of the old people. The scene of swallowing a medicinal pill and turning white hair black and throwing away a walking stick could only happen in legends. Even when he was stung by the white sandworm for the first time and the spiritual vigor entered his body, he was in so much pain that he wanted to die. And this was with the body of a young 17 or 18-year-old with skills. Could the old people's bodies withstand it? Chapter 117. Another thing that tempted him was the ubiquitous recruitment brochures in the market square. There were all kinds of high and mighty sects: Misty Immortal Sect, Jade Emperor Peak, Clear to Shita Palace, Sky Piercing Peak, and so on. It was as if this place was the center of cultivation in the universe. Want to learn? Want to join a sect? You have to pay a price, right? There were all kinds of unimaginable test conditions, difficult but barely achievable. You need to spend some time, and of course, all kinds of fees came with it. This set seemed to have formed a huge industrial chain in his previous life. Although he wasn't too clear about the details, he understood the basic structure. 10 sects, 10 scams. In other words, it was impossible for the sects of this cultivation world to recruit people in this kind of environment. In Hu Yang's words, those rare blessed lands had very limited spiritual opportunity resources. The first to be recruited were the second and third generations of cultivators, followed by the descendants of their relatives and friends in the cultivation world. Finally, they would look for children around 10 years old in the mortal world, all of whom had outstanding aptitude for cultivation. How could they recruit fully grown adults like them, who were basically a pack of wolves? It wasn't that the sect was scamming, but that someone was using the sect's name to scam. Even though he knew it was a scam, it was like walking on a recruitment street, with wild shouts constantly ringing in his ears. Nor the university recruiting, 300 points to enter. Tsinghua discount, 250 points to come quickly. Southern University vomiting blood. As long as it's a person. Lanxiang education regardless of background. As long as it's not a person, spirit stones will do. Southern University sunset class. As long as you can still crawl and breathe. It was really tempting. In any case, it wasn't too expensive. If he gave it a try, who knows, he might meet a really good recruit. The scammers saw through the minds of the rogue cultivators. Lu Xiaoyi quickly walked past these fervent gazes. He finally had a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a cultivator. In the center of Phoenix Mountain Market Square was the original Phoenix Market. The original merchants would usually rent out their shops in this kind of situation instead of continuing their business. This was because their goods could not be compared to these outsiders. Whether it was in terms of price or quality, there was no comparison. Instead of standing here for a few months without selling anything, it was better to rent out their shops and earn a considerable amount of rent. That was a good deal. This was the sect business that the stall owner had told him about. It was targeted at high-end customers. Those who wanted to pick up the bargain would not come here because the stall owners were all experts. The first shop that Lu Xiaoyi saw had a newly made curtain outside the door. The words 1 yuan were written on it. Presumably, this was the name of a certain cultivation sect, but the specific country it belonged to was unknown. The purpose was that although you knew that there was a sect called Yuan in this world, you would never be able to find it. You wouldn't even know which country it was in, and you wouldn't even know if it was in the north, south, east, or west. Lu Xiaoyi straightened his face and was about to step in when a young man with an excellent demeanor reached out to stop him. Our shop only entertains Foundation Establishment seniors. Visitors are declined. Thank you. Lu Xiaoyi was startled and immediately understood. He was not angry. You're just an ant. Why do you have to be angry? He turned around and walked 2 steps, then turned back. Is our Yuan sect still recruiting this year? The young man was also startled, but his reaction was very quick. It's a Yuan temple, not a Yuan sect. We are not recruiting this year. Small sects and small households are overcrowded. If you want to enter, aren't there so many big sects outside recruiting? He emphasized the words big sects and big sections. The meaning of ridicule was obvious. A smart person would of course understand. If they were stupid enough to persist in going about things the wrong way, then they deserved to be cheated. Lu Xiaoyi was not disappointed. It was within his expectations. He went to the second shop and was rejected. This was the characteristic of a sect shop. They did not accept those lame mouths, loose cultivators. Not to mention that they did not have the ability to spend. They looked very carefully, and their mouths were big. They wished that the whole cultivation world would know the things in your shop. It was very annoying. Obviously, the restriction of Foundation Establishment and above was just an excuse. In fact, the real restriction was loose cultivators. As long as sect disciples showed their origin, cheat-eating disciples could also enter. Moreover, this kind of people was the majority. This was a difference in treatment. But Lu Xiaoyi was still not dissatisfied. In the cultivation world, weakness was the original sin. If you were still dissatisfied, then you were weak and stupid. There was no saving you. However, there were always orthodoxies that believed in fairness. Among the hundreds of shops in Fenghuang Mountain, there were 10 or so. Some of them required you to show your wealth. Most of them were limited to 100 low-level spirit stones. Among them, there were 3 that were Dafa. They did not need anything, and there was no one guarding the door. Lu Xiaoyi was in such a shop. It was called Li Shi Tian and occupied the largest building in the entire market. From his point of view, its strength must be among the best in this low-level cultivation world. The limelight was not something that every orthodoxy could achieve. It needed strength as a backing. If a big sect like Li Shi Tian did the same thing, people would say that you were full of spirit and had the temperament of a leader. If it was a small sect, people would say that you were overestimating yourself and puffing yourself up at your own cost. This was also a double standard. The style of the market was different from that of Xianlai Town at the foot of Crane Mountain. Li Shi Tian's shop did not only provide index catalogs. The real things were hidden away. This was too petty and showed that they lacked confidence. The things were placed on long, circular tables. There was no glass cover separating them. However, the onlookers still could not casually pick them up. This was because there was a layer of protection. If they reached their hands out, they would feel a prickling sensation. It was because Li Shi Tian did not have any scruples that there were many rogue cultivators gathered here. Among them, there were many who were willing to fork out spirit stones to buy. Rogue cultivators could not be underestimated. With such a large number of people, it was not difficult to find some who had some wealth. Li Shi Tian's style also satisfied the rogue cultivators because they were respected. This was also a way of business. Lu Xiaoyi had already stayed here for 10 days. He wandered around the shops of the 10 or so sections. He did not want to stay here. He wanted to wait a few months until the market was over. He wanted to find a target, complete the transaction, and leave immediately. This was the right way to go. Otherwise, in a place like this, the longer you stayed, the more things you wanted to buy. If you did not spend all your wealth, you would not be able to leave. In the end, he chose this shop. It was not only because of the variety of goods here, but also because of the more considerate way of doing business here. Chapter 118. This was the 3rd time Lu Xiaoyi had come here, so he didn't waste any more time. He went directly to a stern-looking cultivator. He had been observing him for a long time. Unlike the other cultivators, this person rarely took the initiative to receive customers, as if he was dissatisfied with playing such a role. This meant that he didn't care about the cut he received from every successful transaction. This made Lu Xiaoyi feel more at ease. "Senior brother, I need a room." This was the reason Lu Xiaoyi had chosen this place to trade. The heaven of departed life was very good at business and had a good grasp of the customer's psychology. Transactions that cost more than 100 low-grade spirit stones would be placed in the side room to protect the privacy and safety of the buyer. Moreover, the room had a separate passage, so one could leave directly without going through the main hall. This prevented many greedy cultivators from spying on them. Safety was very important to him. Perhaps one day, he would be able to carry a sack of spirit stones in and pour it on the table with a splash. But now he couldn't. The cultivator was only a few years older than Lu Xiaoyi. He was startled when he heard this, as if he didn't understand why this person didn't look for his cheerful companions, but instead came to him, a cold-faced cultivator who acted as if everyone owed him spirit stones. But his character determined that he wouldn't say much. He turned and walked to a room, followed by Lu Xiaoyi. In the room, the two sat across a table. Lu Xiaoyi didn't waste any time. "I saw that your shop posted a list of red threadworms. If I provide a large amount, what price can you give me?" "What do you mean by a large amount?" "More than 1,000. The cold-faced cultivator was finally interested in talking. "1 for 2. 1 red threadworm can be exchanged for 2 low-grade spirit stones. If the transaction exceeds 1,000, we have gifts for you." Just as Lu Xiaoyi was used to red threadworms, and thus developed spiritual resistance. Sect cultivators who were used to using spirit stones or other spiritual items would also develop spiritual resistance. This was also the reason why the Heaven of Departed Life had posted this request. In fact, almost every shop had similar requirements. If you could satisfy them, you would get a discount. For example, red threadworms. When he traded with Liang Quangren in Xianlai Town, it was around 10 for 16. This Heaven of Departed Life was indeed rich and overbearing. Around 1,000. Can you exchange them now? The cold-faced cultivator snorted. Even if you have 10,000, I can give you spirit stones right now. Both of them were straightforward people. They took out their spirit beast pouches and began to count. After counting, there were a total of 1121 insects, which was less than he remembered. This was because some of the insects in the spirit beast pouches had been eaten by their own kind. Lu Xiaoyi kindly reminded, "Some were eaten. If you don't store them properly, I'm afraid there will be more losses." The cold-faced cultivator was disdainful. "That's because your spirit beast bag is too low-grade. It doesn't have the ability to suppress the worms. All right, my first benefit is to give you a high-grade spirit beast bag in addition to the total of 2,242 spirit stones. Do you want low-grade spirit stones or mid-grade spirit stones?" Lu Xiaoyi blushed with shame. "Low-grade spirit stones. They'll be more convenient to use and feel better when you weigh them." The cold-faced cultivator finally smiled. Not only because this rogue cultivator was witty and straightforward, but also because he no longer needed to stay in the shop after this transaction was completed. He could go out and learn what he needed. Disciples like him had to complete a certain amount of transactions before they could move freely. His identity was a bit special, but he was not an exception. Because of his personality, he did not do things that flattered people. Thus, his results were mediocre. He wore his worries on his face, and as a result, fewer people came to him to trade. Do you need anything else? If you need it at the departing world heavenly exchange, the more transactions there are, the greater the discount. Moreover, I can probably help you with some ideas. This opportunity is rare. I think you understand. This was also Lu Xiaoyi's idea. I want your shop's third-turn spirit gathering formation, as well as the knowledge related to spirit gathering formations, and a few special materials for setting up the formation. The cold-faced cultivator had now become a smiling cultivator. After all, who would want to be born with a pout? His mood was good, and his attitude was naturally sunny. All right. However, let me remind you that the third-turn spirit gathering formation is the best spirit gathering formation that can be used in the Chi-Eater stage. You're right on this point. However, I see that you're not very familiar with formations, and there is some basic knowledge that you don't know. Among the dozens of spirit gathering formations in my shop, there is one called the Gentle Wind Spirit Gathering Formation. It's most suitable to be used in a dry desert environment and has double the effect with half the effort. The fact that you were able to catch so many red threadworms must have been done in a desert environment. If your place of cultivation is far away from the place where you caught the worms, then using the third-turn spirit gathering formation is the right solution. If you still want to gather and cultivate in a desert environment, I advise you to use the Gentle Wind Spirit Gathering Formation. Not only is it cheaper, but the effect is also much better than the third-turn Spirit Gathering Formation. You must know that when setting up a formation, the environment is the first consideration. Lu Xiaoyi was enlightened. After all, there were very few true disciples of a sect who were despicable and sinister. Such people were not in line with the nature of cultivation. If a grand sect taught such trash, it would not last long. This was the reason why he was determined to trade in a sect shop. It was true that filial sons were born from poor families, but there were also many hoodlums and swindlers from poor families. I also need a few kinds of spells and talismans that can be used to consume chi. You know, individual cultivators always have a lot of troublesome matters. I always need a few kinds of self-defense. Can you recommend a few kinds? Lu Xiaoyi actually had his own choices, but his knowledge in spells was too limited, so he did not have much confidence in his choice. This time, he had finally become a big customer, and the other party was sincere. He was also from a sect, so in terms of foresight, he was much better than Lu Xiaoyi. In cultivation, under the premise of having the ability to explore independently, it was also very important to listen to the advice of experienced people. He had never rejected asking for advice, but it was a pity that there was no one to ask for advice before. The cultivator nodded. If Lu Xiaoyi could ask and did not put on airs, then this person could be saved. There were many individual cultivators who always wanted to open up a new path and walk a path that ordinary people had not walked before. Their thinking was good, but how could it be so easy? These things were summed up by the seniors in the cultivation world for tens of thousands of years. There were countless bloody experiences in them. How could they not be compared to the whimsical ideas of an individual cultivator? Such individual cultivators had no future, but this young man was not bad. He knew that he did not understand and was willing to ask without shame. This was a good start. What kind of spells have you learned? Which do you feel is the most intimate with? Lu Xiaoyi was a little embarrassed. There are only 3 kinds: the fire spirit spell, the ice finger spell, and the iron drum. As for proficiency, the fire spirit spell is okay, but the ice finger spell is difficult. It always seems to be separated by a layer. As for the iron drum, you also know that it's just a roar. It's really awkward. I didn't practice it much. The cultivator shook his head helplessly. It was indeed difficult to be an individual cultivator. It was equivalent to crossing a river blindly. If he did not find a way to catch the red threadworm, he was afraid that this would be the case for the rest of his life. He had a background, so he was not very interested in catching the red threadworm. In the departed era heaven, obtaining spiritual opportunity from the spirit worm was just a small path, not worth the effort. Chapter 119. He was in a good mood today, so he said a few more words. In theory, to choose the most suitable spell for yourself, you need to first figure out your 5 elements. If you have the water element, then naturally choosing the water element spell will be twice the result with half the effort. I guess you don't know what 5 elements you have, right? Lu Xiaoyi was embarrassed. The 5 elements know me, but I don't know them. The cultivator's expression said, I knew it. All right, I suggest you buy a 5 elements compass. This is the simplest tool to determine the 5 elements of the body. It can easily determine which element you belong to. Of course, if you want to know accurately, you will need the help of an expert. I don't think you will have such an opportunity. Based on your self-description, at least you don't reject fire-type spells. What I mean is, you should focus on fire-type spells. Don't waste your time on other things. It's completely unnecessary in the Chi Eater stage. I think you know very well that there's nothing better than fighting with a knife in the Chi Eating stage. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. What the cultivator said was true. In fact, when he fought with 2 other cultivators, he did win by swinging his sword. Spells? At that time, he had already forgotten about them. Since you've chosen fire element, you should know your position well. Fire element spells are a joke in the Chi Eating stage. They can't even burn the hair on your feet. Therefore, you must choose fire element spells. That way, you'll still have some attack power. At least, your opponent won't take your fire seriously. Your fire spirit spell is also a fire element spell, but it's too weak. It can only hurt people, but it's not fatal. In the heaven of death, there are more than 10 types of fire element spells in the Chi Eating stage, but they're not very useful. They're just used to cheat spirit stones. It's fate that we met today. I can sell you a spell with a certain degree of lethality. It's not passed down by the sect, and I don't dare to teach it to you privately. This is my family's private collection. It's not worth keeping too much of a secret. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to teach it to you privately. Lu Xiaoyi was a little tempted. Obviously, this guy wanted to use this opportunity to do some private business. But it didn't matter. Who didn't have selfish motives? As long as he thought it was suitable, it was fine. Please speak. The cultivator lowered his voice. This fire technique of mine is called the phosphorescence technique. The fire isn't big, only the light of the candle, but its burning power far surpasses that of other flames. Most importantly, once this fire touches the body, it becomes more and more intense. Unless there's a special technique, it can't be extinguished. Take a look. using one's fingers to form hand seals and accumulating energy. This was a common problem for chi-eating cultivators when casting spells. Even cultivators from sects were not exempt from this. That was because the amount of spiritual essence provided by the spiritual essence in their bodies was not strong enough. Directly casting spells was very time-consuming, and there was no such thing as instant spells. Therefore, after chi-eating cultivators learned spells, they did not directly cast spells to attack others. Just their casting speed was enough for others to slash them several times. Their goal was to be able to throw talismans after learning spells. In this world of cultivation, if you want to throw talismans, you have to learn this technique. Otherwise, you won't be able to activate it. Not long after, a flame the size of a thumb appeared in the cultivator's hand. He hurriedly flicked the flame to the ground, but he saw that the fire did not extinguish. It burned everything it touched until it burned a small hole in the thick floor. The cultivator saw that the effect was almost there. He took out a handful of sand from somewhere and stuffed it into the small hole. Only then did he extinguish the flame. Seeing this, Lu Xiaoyi was secretly speechless. If his body was touched by this thing, he was afraid that he would have to cut off his flesh to stop the damage. The smell in the room was a little unpleasant. The cultivator hurriedly opened the window and regretted it. I shouldn't have demonstrated it. I'm going to get scolded again. Lu Xiaoyi was very satisfied with the power of the phosphorescence. This is good. I want it. If I have more phosphorescence talismans, I don't think I'll lose in a fight. The cultivator rolled his eyes. More? I've only made 10 phosphorescence talismans in all these years. I can't give you more. You've seen the power of this thing. I won't beat around the bush. I can't give it to you cheaply. The price is the phosphorescence talisman jade slip and 5 talismans. 300 spirit stones. Lu Xiaoyi did not hesitate. There was a big difference between the appearance goods and the real goods. It could save lives and kill people. This thing could not be seen in the outside world. Good, that's it. The cultivator was very satisfied with his straightforwardness. He was not good at bargaining, and he hated people bargaining. The price he quoted was very fair. This phosphorescence talisman was a consummate technique. He had never heard of any sect having it. It was worth the money. He was also not worried that this person would take it and use it against him. The phosphorescence talisman's production method and materials were very special. It was not something that a rogue cultivator could produce. He said, "You have to hide this thing well. I'm telling you, you can't throw it around like you're using the spirit flame technique. The best way is to use the spirit flame technique to confuse people. Then, when you have the confidence, you can secretly use it." The transaction between the two of them was very pleasant because they didn't waste any time. Lu Xiaoyi also asked for a few other things, such as a large number of spirit fire talismans that had been used up. In the end, after settling the bill, they still had 1,500 spirit stones left. The cultivator counted out 1,000 low-grade spirit stones and added another 50 mid-grade spirit stones. I'll teach you another lesson. When using mid-grade spirit stones as the eye of the spirit gathering array, the effect is the best. Cultivation is important. Don't be stingy. After the two finished the transaction, the cultivator waved his hand and said, "Don't ask for my name. I didn't sell you the phosphorescence talisman. If it weren't for the fact that I urgently need spirit stones and that I find you pleasing to the eye, I really wouldn't have sold this thing." Lu Xiaoyi nodded his thanks and slipped out of the back door, blending into the vast crowd. He did not believe the last sentence. This guy must have sold it more than once. He guessed it from the fact that he always had the phosphorescence talisman jade slip on him. However, this had nothing to do with him. As long as the technique was useful, it was enough. Now, he could be considered a cultivator with a trump card. He would not fight with his life on the line and still have to wield that hateful sword to play close combat. He really did not want to see blood. He circled around the crowd a few times. There shouldn't be anyone following him, unless the person who had his eyes on him was a foundation establishment stage cultivator. If that was the case, it was only natural. There was nothing he could do. Without any hesitation, he left the valley and headed in the direction of Pooh City. He had been out for a long time and was somewhat homesick. The first time he entered the market square, he was targeted in Xianlai town. That was because the market square was too small and he could not keep a low profile. However, in Fenghuang Mountain, there are thousands of people in the big market square. His spinning did not seem out of place. He felt that he was rich, but in other people's eyes, he was just a slightly wealthy, loose cultivator. This was the meaning of the saying, "A great hermit lives in the imperial court." In his estimation, 1,500 spirit stones could last him for at least a few years. This was because he did not absorb the spiritual power of spirit stones. Instead, he relied on the operation of the spirit gathering formation to absorb the spiritual vigor of heaven and earth. There was a huge difference in this. Just by operating the formation, the consumption of spirit stones was very limited. The only problem was that he was afraid that in the future, it would be very difficult for him to have the opportunity to continue the joy of running and cultivating. This was his creation, but reality proved that his creation was not beneficial to the final foundation establishment stage. This was a result that could not be more realistic. Chapter 120. 2 months and 9 days. From the time he left Pooh City until now, this time was not too long, but it was gradually increasing. Lu Xiaoyi looked at the low walls of Pooh City and secretly warned himself that he could not make it longer each time. This would make the people who cared about him anxiously. When he entered the city, the soldiers at the city gate looked a little strange. The familiar merchants on the street were also the same. This gave him an ominous feeling in his heart. He rushed back to Lu Province. His appearance did not change, but the gatekeeper's expression could not be hidden from him. It was an expression that only appeared when something big had happened at home. What happened? Tell me the truth. The current young master of Lu family was not the young master of the past. There was an unquestionable power in his every move. The gatekeeper knelt on the ground and cried, "Young master, it happened a month ago." The new emperor ascended the throne, but he still bears a grudge for being punished by the old master to kneel in public. A month ago, he sent a messenger saying that he wanted the madam to enter the capital to see the emperor and see the glory of the golden age. If she did not go, it would be like kneeling before the emperor under the scorching sun. 2 hours would be enough. The madam chose not to go and knelt in front of the court at noon. In less than an hour, she fainted. Madame Caihuan took her place and knelt for the last time, but who knew that after the time passed, the two old madams fell ill. The madam knelt for a shorter time, but her legs are now unable to walk and she is bedridden. Madame Caihuan only lasted for a few days before passing away. Lu Xiaoyi only felt a wave of anger in his heart that was about to burst out. He subconsciously wanted to turn the horse, but he did not expect that the gatekeeper would grab the reins tightly and shout at the top of his voice into the mansion. "The young master is back. Everyone, help me hold him back." A large number of servants quickly rushed out of the courtyard. They reined in their horses and hugged his legs. They were afraid that the young master would be angry and turn the horses back to the capital. Wasn't that courting death? How could Lu Xiaoyi be held back by these ordinary people? The reason why he did not move was that his strong self-control as a cultivator was telling him that now was not the time to go back. He was not alone. His mother was sick in bed. He didn't have the ability to complete his revenge behind his mother's back. He could run for his life, but could his mother do the same at her age? With a light struggle, he, who did not look very strong, had already broken free from the entanglement of many men. His tone had also returned to normal, as if he was just an ordinary servant. Close the door. Don't let the people outside see you as a joke. Seeing him walk towards the inner residence, the servants also let go of their hands, knowing that he was going to see the mistress. With the mistress speaking up, the young master should listen, right? Speaking of which, why did young master have so much strength? Even a group of servants who were used to doing rough work couldn't control them at all. It seemed that the few years of practicing martial arts had made the young master's martial prowess extraordinary. As Lu Xiaoyi walked towards the inner residence, he tried his best to control his speed. What was done could not be undone, and there was no point in being anxious. He needed to calm down in the shortest amount of time possible. He was the only pillar of support left in the vast Lu province. If he panicked, his family would be gone. Therefore, in the eyes of his servants and maids along the way, the young master was still as calm as ever, as if nothing had happened. Even when he saw the potted plants by the side of the path, he specially instructed the servants to add water to them. They were a little withered. Could it be that no one had told the young master about the news? But now no one dared to speak up rashly. Outside the inner residence, Ping was anxiously pacing around. When he saw Lu Xiaoyi return, he hurriedly went up to welcome him. However, Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand at him. "I know. No need to panic. Calm down the people in the outer courtyard. If there are people who have bad intentions, you can just dismiss them. Your mission is to take care of the matters in the outer courtyard, including the farms. Don't let others see you as a joke and take advantage of you. I'm here with Mother." Ping finally had a pillar of support. He knew a little about the young master's miraculous abilities. Although he was usually afraid that he would cause trouble, now that trouble had come knocking, the one he relied on was still someone who liked to cause trouble. This was the wonder of the world. He walked all the way inside and slowly entered his mother's bedroom. A thick smell of medicine assailed his nostrils. Outside the screen, an old doctor with a white beard was instructing his disciples to decoct medicine. Lu Xiaoyi recognized him. He was not from Pu City, but was the most famous old doctor in the prefecture. He had come to treat his mother before. It seemed that Ping Yan's reaction was not bad this time. He knew the severity of the situation. He bowed to the old doctor. He would not look down on the mortal world's doctors just because his methods might be better. He was indeed skilled in a certain aspect, but the old doctor was a professional. The old doctor returned the greeting. Neither of them spoke as they were afraid to disturb the person sleeping soundly inside. Lu Xiaoyi pointed behind the screen, indicating that he should go in and see his mother. The old doctor nodded and put a finger on his lips, indicating that he should not disturb the patient. After Lu Xiaoyi turned around the screen, there were only two servants who were the closest to his mother. They were both old people who had been with his mother for at least 10 years. Their complexions were thin, and it seemed that they had suffered a lot these days. The two servants gently moved away from the bed and allowed their young master to come closer. Lu Xiaoyi frowned. The smell of medicine here was getting stronger. He did not know what benefits such an environment would bring to the patient. Anyway, he knew that in his previous life, except for special infectious diseases, almost all the wards were clean, well ventilated, and had green plants and flowers. Only such an environment could give the patient a good mood. Mood was crucial to the recovery of any patient because it was the root of miracles. As he approached the bed, his mother seemed to have changed into a different person. Her eyes were sunken, her cheeks were sunken, and her complexion was ashen. Lu Xiaoyi knew that this was not only a physical blow, but also a psychological blow. If her legs were not able to walk, it would not drag her down like this. It was the psychological self-blame caused by Aunt Saihuan's death that made his mother feel guilty. Sitting on the small stool in front of the bed, he stretched out a hand and held his mother's bony hand. At this moment, because of her motherly nature, Lu Xiaoyi's hand suddenly tightened and tightly grasped Lu Xiaoyi's hand. The strength was so great that it was not something a 50 or 60-year-old woman should have. Immediately, she opened her eyes. Because of the sudden movement, she could not see clearly. She could only shout, "Little E is back? Is it Little E? Stay here with me. You are not allowed to go anywhere." Lu Xiaoyi said softly, "Mother, Little E is back. I will stay here. I will not go anywhere." Lu Yaosher still could not see clearly because of the gushing tears. However, she could hear the voice that she had yearned for day and night. As strong as she was still a woman. When disaster befell her, the only person she could rely on was her son. No matter how willful, how unruly, how disobedient he was. This was the reason why she raised her son. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.